Hey everybody, happy Monday. Welcome to another edition of the TechStrong TV streaming broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is January 18th, and we have an amazing lineup of interviews for today's session. First of all, before we get started, want to remind you that we do have the Predict Virtual Summit coming up later on this week. It's happening Wednesday and Thursday, January 20th and 21st. Two-day event, chock full of interviews, sessions, panel discussions, and more, talking about what folks see happening in the world of IT, cyber, DevOps, cloud native, all that good stuff happening in 2021. So mark your calendars if you haven't done so yet. Definitely make plans to join us for that. But for today's show, we have, as I said, we have an amazing lineup. We start out with an interview between Alan and Mark Logan, who is the CEO of LogRhythm. LogRhythm recently made an acquisition of a company called MistNet, which is an AI-driven threat detection and hunting software company. Good stuff. We've been hearing a lot about AI in the cybersecurity space. So Mark and Alan discuss what the addition of MistNet means to LogRhythm and what it means for cybersecurity in general. After that, Alan talks with Sinan Aaron from Barracuda. He is the VP of Zero Trust Access. Barracuda recently did a survey of 800 people about cloud usage and security. So Alan and Sinan discuss the results of that survey and maybe offers up a few tips for the direction of cloud security and cloud use in the coming years. So good stuff there. After that, we have, and I'm so excited to be announcing this, we have the first episode of the Haunted Hacker podcast that is done by Mike Jones, who is one of the co-founders of the hacktivist group Anonymous. He has a great podcast talking about all things cybersecurity, threats and breaches, and basically the state of security as we know it. So each podcast is going to be kind of broken up into three segments throughout the week. So today is the very first one kicking things off. So please do tune in to Mike's podcast, Haunted Hacker. Should be a great one to listen to, and I'm so excited that it's joining our regular lineup. After the Haunted Hacker podcast, in our Something Old segment, we have a session from our recent DevOps Experience Virtual Summit. Tammy Buteau, who is the site reliability engineer over at Gremlin, I believe she's a senior site reliability engineer. She did a discussion on building and scaling SRE teams. Good stuff all the way around. You know, we've been hearing a lot about site reliability engineering, how it's becoming a more popular movement among large enterprises. But unfortunately, you can't take a class on site reliability engineering and managing that. So she in her discussion, she kind of parses out how to effectively create and manage an SRE team, who makes up an SRE team, what to look out for. Tammy offers up her experience and her expertise in building and scaling SRE teams. So lots of practical advice in this discussion. So definitely give this one a look. Following her, I come back with the news headlines for the day, and then I jump into a conversation with Tim Francis from Travelers. He is the enterprise cyber lead at Travelers. Lots of background in cyber insurance, and he and I have a discussion about the current ransomware landscape and some of the steps that companies can take to help protect themselves from becoming a ransomware victim. As I said, he's at Travelers, and he deals with ransomware on a fairly regular basis. So he's got some really great advice for companies. So definitely tune in and listen to that. After that, another inaugural a feature here, segment here on TechStrong TV. I kick off the monthly DevOps Institute Ambassador Insights panel discussion. This is something I'll be doing monthly, and it features hopefully 3 panelists for each one from the DevOps Institute Ambassadors program. And each Each time we'll be discussing a different topic. This month, it's enterprise digital transformation. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Pankaj Gupta, who is with Citrix, Jennifer Fisher, who's with the Center for Innovation and Professional Studies at Felician University, and Sean Davis of TransUnion. And as I said, we talk about enterprise digital transformation from a number of different angles, including the recent the ongoing pandemic and how that's impacted digital transformation, and some of the things that enterprises need to keep in mind if they have not started their digital transformation journey yet. Hint, it's not too late. So we have a great conversation about that. And then after that, webinars preview for the day, and lots of great webinars on the site. So definitely check that one out. After I do my thing, then Mitch comes on, and he's got his latest episode of the Analyst Corner, talks about developer cloud and what's going on in that space. Really interesting if you don't know much about the developer cloud and how developers are kind of embracing the cloud for their efforts greater than they have been. Definitely check this one out. Rounding out today's show is an interview between Mike Vizard and Splice Machine CEO Monty Zwieben. They talk about where feature stores fit in the emerging world of ML ops. We've been hearing a lot about ML ops and AI lately, so this is definitely a relevant conversation to listen to. All right, like I said, we're jam-packed with good stuff on today's show, so stick around. We've got lots coming up, but let's first break for this commercial, then we'll be right back.
Greetings, Earth people. The year 2020 has been most illogical. It has taken a worldwide pandemic to stop us from our traveling, from attending our conferences. But that same pandemic has accelerated digital transformation to the highest levels of warp speed. What does 2021 hold in store for us? But we will make our best guess at Predict 2021. Find out our most logical predictions at the 3rd Annual Predict Virtual Summit taking place on January 21st and 22nd of the new year. Hear from futurists, leaders, and thinkers in the fields of DevOps, cloud native, cyber, and digital transformation. Register now at predict2021.com to see the already announced lineup. Admission is free, but it is limited. Sponsorships are available. Don't miss out on the most logical look at 2021. Predict 2021. Live long and prosper.
Hey, everybody, let's get this started. First up is Alan Schimmel and Mark Logan, CEO of Logarithm. They talk about Logarithm's recent acquisition of MistNet and how the inclusion of AI technology is going to impact Logarithm moving forward. So let's give this conversation a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Mark Logan. Mark is the CEO of Logarithm. Most of you, I think most of our audience is somewhat familiar with Logarithm, but there may be some folks who aren't. So I'm going to ask Mark to explain that. But hey, Mark, welcome to TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, Mark, so as I mentioned, I think most of our audience knows Logarithm, but maybe they don't, or maybe there are some folks who don't. Why don't we, sounds like a good starting place.
Of course,
Give me
I can give
background.
Give a little perspective on the business. So Logarithm has been in the SIM business, security information and event management business for now going on 18 years, and we are considered one of the true leaders in that space. We occupy a leaders quadrant in most analysts' view. And over the course of that time, we've continued to innovate the Logarithm platform and portfolio. We are completely focused on cybersecurity and protecting enterprises from breaches, risks, et cetera. And over the time period, we've been fortunate enough to build a customer base of well over 4,000 clients. So we're both considered to be one of the leaders via analysts, and obviously our customers have spoken, and we've amassed a very, very large scale of clients.
Fantastic. And Mark, you guys just announced a couple days ago an acquisition. Why don't you share that maybe with the audience, and we could dive into that a little bit.
Great, thanks, Alan. So you're catching us on a very exciting moment in our history. Yesterday, we announced the acquisition of Misnet, a company that has a suite of very, very innovative solutions that we can chat about as we talk today, mostly targeted at the NDR and extending into the XDR segments of our market, which are adjacencies to the SIM market and entirely logical connection points. So we were very proud and excited to make that announcement yesterday, and we think this will have virtually immediate impact on our customers, on our partners, and on the market itself.
Absolutely. So I should mention to the audience, we're recording this, of course, on Thursday, the 14th. So the acquisition announcement was made the 13th. Mark, people may not actually see this, I'm going to guess, until Monday. So I just don't want to mess up their timelines if they go back to look for the news or anything. So a couple of things. Before we jump into the specifics around NDR, XDR, what's it like doing an acquisition during these COVID times? It's got to be a little unusual.
Well, back in the old days, right, pre-COVID, Alan, you would meet the technical team, you would meet the leadership team, you would spend time together, you would establish a personal bond and rapport, and that's a little bit different now that everybody is virtual, as I'm sure all of your listeners will attest to. Having said that, you have to figure out ways to make those relationships and do the technical due diligence in a remote fashion. So maybe I'll give you a couple of examples. Probably not unusual to anybody that's gone through M&A, as I have, to do a proof of concept with the solution set to really take it through its paces. In the case with Misnet, we actually we spun up 3 different POCs, monitoring information and data coming through various parts of the logarithm network. So we were end users. And what was very interesting and innovative is we were able to create those POCs inside of about 15 or 20 minutes each. So the technology sets up very, very quickly and begins delivering results and detections really in the blink of an eye. So that was one of the strategies used to ensure that while we can't look, touch, meet, and feel individuals the way we're accustomed to, we can certainly put the technology through its paces, as we did.
Absolutely. You know, I've also done a lot of M&A in my background, and I just can't imagine when you can't, you know, go physically inspect something or meet people in person and do that kind of bonding thing. But you know what? You guys aren't the only one. There's a ton of deals getting done in spite of COVID. And so you know, it's doable for sure. Let's jump into the technology there, though, and why you guys are so excited about it. First of all, let's start again, a little level set. NDR, XDR, what do we mean?
So NDR is network detection and response. So said simply, Alan, it's a technology that can go out and map to an enterprise's network and determine how to detect and where to detect any potential abnormalities and issues that could potentially cause threats to that enterprise, and then alerts and allows for some automated response to those issues. And there's a number of innovations here we can dig into as we continue that Misnet brings to the table, because we've been speaking with dozens and dozens of companies prior to selecting Misnet as the company that we think is the leader in NDR detection over the network. XDR is perhaps the next generation, so the extended detect and respond moniker, and that incorporates not just the network, but incorporates cloud computing, incorporates endpoint as well. So that's clearly part of our roadmap, in which MissNet accelerates significantly.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, that they're not directly overlapping with what you guys do at Logarithm and SIM and all of that. They're adjacent to.
That you bring up, Alan, that's exactly correct. And I think there are three main takeaways that I think would be helpful for your listeners. The first of which, this does expand our Logarithm portfolio, our SIM portfolio of products, in a very logical way that is non-competitive with anything we have. It's a hand-in-glove fit. Virtually 100% of our 4,000 plus customers can look at this technology and bring it into their enterprise as a value add. Maybe the second area is this does specifically address a trend where, as you can imagine, speaking with our customers and our partners and analysts about market trends, and there's a clear and evident trend right afoot now to consolidate XDR, NDR, and SIM into one platform, because customers really don't want to be managing multiple solutions for cybersecurity. It gets too complex. Frankly, it gets too costly. So certainly with now Logarithm customers, we're taking that burden away from them and providing one integrated platform to manage all risk. And then maybe the third area that I believe is noteworthy, Alan, is the various routes to market. So we have 4 different routes to market for this new technology. I mentioned our 4,000 customers and the immediate fit and value proposition there. We also believe we will attach MissNet into our standard SIM offerings as we go out to market, meeting with new prospects. We have a very robust partner organization that's global as well. So our dozens and dozens of MSSP, managed security service providers, will find this highly valuable. And then lastly, MissNet will be sold as a standalone solution to those companies that might already have a SIM that would be potentially competitive with Logarithm, but it's a nice add-on to even our competitors' products. So we see a myriad of different ways the solution will add value into enterprises.
I don't disagree at all. Don't disagree at all. So let's talk. I mentioned I've done a bunch of M&A back in the .com day. A company called Interliant. I was doing corp and biz dev, and we did 30 acquisitions in 36 months. So it was a little crazy.
We should write you onto the team, the acquisition team.
You know what? If I don't do it, if I think about acquisitions now, and here at Media Ops and stuff, and it was fun then. But let's say this: we broke a lot of eggs making those omelets. Okay, and of course that's always a problem or a potential problem with any acquisition. Is right. How do you maintain what made that company that you acquired good or great, while kind of grafting that onto your tree,
right?
Without breaking the eggs. So what's the plan is to kind of integrate these and have a joint go-to-market? Obviously the products align nicely, or the areas align nicely. Product integration is a whole nother story. What's the plan?
So as you say, there's some art and science. The science is the product integration, and we already have some of the integration started. We've got a head start based on the proof of concepts that have been running over the past month and a half. So we feel in-house that we not only have a knowledge base of the solution set, we also have done some of that light integration already. And as I referenced earlier, Alan, it's literally minutes to stand up the environment and to begin to generate alarms and alerts. One of the other aspects that I think is noteworthy about the solution set is not only the speed to market and the speed with which you can start gaining value, it's the speed with which it learns. So the much overused phrase machine learning, ML capability, is actually very front and center to this solution. So one of the challenges in many cyber security operations is false alarms, false positives, and just a deluge of alerts. Well, the machine learning capability that's very unique within the MissNet offering, we've seen operating here, where over this 6-week period of time, it's gotten smarter and smarter and smarter. So we reduced the false positives, and we've seen this machine learning working right in front of us. So So I think perhaps a long way of answering the first part of the question is ensuring the success is the amount of time we spent pre-close for the M&A with our hands on the technology. And maybe some of the art here is we're bringing over 100% of the Missnet employee base. Their founder and former CEO, Jeff Madsen, tremendous mind and innovator, just a great entrepreneur. He'll have a very high stature position within Logarithm, a position in which he's able to convey all of the product integration needs into product and be able to work with the field to ensure that we're addressing customer needs and also work with analysts. So bringing that team over, I believed was critical to the ongoing success.
Absolutely. Very cool. Hey, Mark, if you don't mind, I want to dive into another area with you.
Please.
So we get back after the new year. We did all hands here at MediaOps, and then I dove into my regular schedule, and I've taped a few panels on cybersecurity for our Predict virtual event. I just did a CTO fireside chat on DevOps and DevSecOps, and with 2 security companies. I did several security-related events with the public over the last week, 10 days. The whole SolarWinds thing is just, I thought people have kind of normalized it, internalized it, and we're looking for, it's had its 15 minutes of fame. But you know what? It still has a lot of legs. It's kind of front and center with our audience, with the public and the general public and within our industry. What effect, or what, from a logarithm perspective, what, if anything, has this wrought?
Well, you bring up a great point. And at Logarithm, we believe that this is actually a defining moment in the industry. And it's taken awareness, cybersecurity awareness, from the CISO's primary objective and focus to the CFO and the CEO's focus and objective now. Gone are the days in which this is just a compliance check the box, because CEOs and boards are now leaning into cybersecurity challenges and threats. So we believe that the vigilance might even be a good thing. We feel bad for SolarWinds and their customers and the subsequent issues, but the awareness that this issue has generated, we believe is a net positive for the industry. Because there will be more and more focus on the nation, state actors, and all of the threat actors out in the market. There's an old saying that there are 2 types of enterprises out there: those who have been breached and those that don't know that they've been breached.
Yep.
So the reality is that the threats are constant. I was meeting with one of our customers pre-COVID, and we sat down for a 10 a.m. meeting. He manages 24 different municipalities in one of the large cities of the U.S. Using Logarithm. And I said, "So how are we doing? Give us a report card." He said, "Well, we've been able to thwart and stop 35 different threats." I said, "What, this year?" He said, "No, since 8 a.m. this morning." So it's and I almost fell off my chair, Alan. But the Logarithm customers are accustomed to this level of vigilance, and I think if you can make a good situation out of a bad, that might be the enterprise and corporation's response that'll be more focused on protect.
Sure. I think that another lesson, I would pass this to our audience, is, I know the SolarWinds folks. I don't know how well you know them, but these are not dumb or bad people. These are very competent people. This sort of thing could happen to anyone, whether you're a vendor or a municipality or a government agency or private enterprise. It could happen to anyone. We always have to be vigilant, right? We always have to be, minding our P's and Q's here and practicing best practices whenever and however we can, not to be the next headline. And that's really, I've been in security 20 years. You don't want to be the next headline.
Well, this particular threat was a very, very sophisticated actor. It's no surprise to you, and it sounds like you've done a little bit of research. And the SolarWinds folks are are very, very good. They're very solid. There may have been a few best practices that they would like to do a redo on, but it was an extremely sophisticated threat, and one that the rest of the cybersecurity marketplace we take very, very seriously. We believe that some of the innovations that MISNet brings to the table, the ability to evaluate in real time endpoint detection, we believe that will continue to help to build those walls and defenses for our customers. But you're absolutely right. There's a degree of vigilance here that's necessary. I may note, Alan, that one of the ardent beliefs at Logarithm is that all logs and all data and all endpoints should be monitored. And one of the challenges in the industry is that could be expensive. So if you go to a CISO or a CIO, or for that matter, a CEO, and say, why wouldn't you monitor everything? Sometimes they say for commercial reasons. So we believe in our value proposition, in our mission, that we should make cybersecurity monitoring affordable to all. So we launched the first, and to our knowledge, the only unlimited data plan. So oftentimes cybersecurity vendors charge based on capacity. And we said we should not constrain our customers based on capacity. Monitor everything for one set and predictable fee. At MISNet, one of the real true innovations is the ability to conduct analytics on the endpoint. So rather than paying the toll and the tax for bringing data from the endpoint into a big data warehouse where you have to then pay for that storage and the data movement, all of the processing is done remote on the endpoint. So that's a patent pending technology that MISNet brings to the table. And frankly, that was one of the key reasons we acquired the solution.
I love that. Yeah, it is. I mean, because I've heard, you hear this with a lot of the log vendors, quite frankly. And it always kind of reminds me of seniors, having to make a choice whether to get their medicine or not, because they can't afford it, right? And in a perfect world, we would log everything, and then we would have the right ML kind of processes and the right programs where, with this greater volume of data, we've got to be smarter about analyzing it, right? But you go from one bottleneck to the next.
This is right.
But that is a problem. And I think one of the innovative ways to deal with it is exactly what you're talking about with MISNet, which is, analyze it and then just store what you need to store after analysis. If you can analyze it on the fly or analyze it on the endpoint, right? And then just put back what you need. That's one way of dealing with it. Unlimited storage plans that are affordable, another way of dealing with it. Better, faster ML and analysis, so that we can, because you don't want to drown in a sea of data. You've got to be able to make heads or sense of it. Another way of dealing with it. But all too often, you're 100% right, Mark. Companies have to make choices. Well, I will, store and analyze this, but I won't do that. And sure enough, that becomes what bites you in the butt.
Yeah, Alan, you have hit the nail right on the head, and we've tried to put strategies in place for our customers and the subsequent pieces of the market that we're pursuing, so that cost doesn't get in the way of security and protection. The technical phrase for what MISNet provides at Logarithm is a distributed mesh network for big data processing, and that might be a mouthful, but in very short order. Those folks that are interested in this type of technology will see how cost effective it can be to protect a massive amount of extended network, where before there were some daunting challenges. And again, that is one of the key reasons for coming together quickly with the folks at MISNet.
Love it. Mark, we're about out of time. You know what we didn't mention? People want to get more information about MISNet, about Logarithm, about the acquisition and how it comes together. Where can they go?
Well, of course, www.logarithm.com would be the first and most logical place to go. And there you'll see a myriad of information about MISNet and the recent acquisition right on our homepage. And there's a number of different avenues to go from there, and open and active chat. And we'll get one of our representatives on the phone ASAP with anybody that wants to set up a proof of concept or a demo or anything along those lines. And I suspect you've got a very bright and astute audience base here, Alan, and hopefully some of the things we've discussed are captivating and engaging to them as well.
I think they are. Security Boulevard gets an awful lot of folks who are very security conscious. Anyway, hey, Mark, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on the acquisition. Having not done one remotely like this and virtually, I hats off to you. We'll be watching how it works out, though, and looking for big things from Logarithm, Misnet, and the whole space.
Well, Alan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Great to finally meet you, and I'll look forward to reconnecting during the next exciting announcement from Logarithm.
You have an open invitation anytime you want to come by and talk. Okay?
All right. Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Logan, CEO of Logarithm, having just announced their acquisition of Misnet. Some exciting news there. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with another guest in just a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Next up is a conversation between Alan and Sinan Aaron of Barracuda, talking about a recent survey that Barracuda did on cloud usage and security. So let's check it out.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV episode here. My guest for this episode is Sinan Aaron. Sinan is with Barracuda. Is it still Barracuda Network, Sinan, or is it just Barracuda these days?
Barracuda, I would say. Yeah, that's what I hear all day, every day.
Me too. Yeah. But I just wanted to be, I wanted to make sure we had it right. How you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic. So Sinan, look, our audience is a very heavy cyber audience, as well as DevOps and cloud native digital. I think most people have heard of Barracuda. But maybe there's some folks who aren't familiar with, or maybe have an outdated sort of view about Barracuda. And maybe we should give them just lay a little foundation about, what's Barracuda today. And then if you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about your role at Barracuda, your background, who are we talking to? So go ahead, take it away.
Sure, happy to. Just a small caveat there. I joined the company about 2 months ago through an acquisition of our startup called FIDE. We are in the Zero Trust Network Access security space. So relatively young and new in the company. We're super excited and privileged to be part of Barracuda. But to be able to answer your question, I have a lot to learn and to bring it. But from a product point, I can say a lot of things. We have a wildly successful cybersecurity product portfolio, both on email, data, networking, and application security side of it. Now we're finding a lot more cohesion across the portfolio of products and bringing a platform approach to security going forward. So there's a lot more exciting news coming out of Barracuda. Well, one you see a lot more integration between our products.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about you and the company that was acquired by Barracuda that you were with. Give us a little background there.
Sure. FIDE is a cybersecurity company. Like most of the cybersecurity companies, we're in the risk mitigation business. However, I've been in cybersecurity personally for over 20 years, right? Started in the mid to late 90s, being, I guess the proper term these days are being more on the hobbyist side of things, right? And then, throughout my career, been mostly on the vendor side, defender side of the equation. And And I found out very quickly that providing risk mitigation by itself in security doesn't cut it anymore. You have to also improve people's day-to-day workflows. You have to improve their performance. You have to improve their, their work product, right? So with that, the FIDE's mission was to build a modern remote access technology built in the zero trust architectural foundation, but yet also improve everybody's remote access experience, right? Be more like consumer applications, be delightful, use these alternative protocols like Quick, like WireGuard, like Barracuda's Tina, to improve their latency, to improve their access profiles, right? So I think security is going to that direction, and FIDE at the very genesis, the company Barracuda acquired, was set out to build a better remote access technology that will modernize your legacy VPN experience, but also improve your day-to-day workflows, sitting on your laptop, especially in shelter-in-place lockdown environments. You'll have much more of a delightful experience compared to legacy VPN.
Excellent. And just one kind of last background, Sinan, what's your current kind of role title with Barracuda?
I'm the VP of Zero Trust Access. So you basically have zero trust on me, right? Just joking.
Okay.
But,
so you're the one we look to. Okay.
Right. So, I guess it's sometimes a misnomer, right? Zero trust, but essentially what we're trying to say is that verify, then trust, quite the opposite of the NSA's old adage, right? Trust, but verify.
Trust, but verify. Right.
Yeah, but verify every single time somebody's requesting access to a piece of application or data, verify the user identity, the context that the user is in, the device's security posture, the context that the device is in, and then grant access, therefore trust. Yeah.
Got it. All right. We got that out of the way. Now let's jump in here. Barracuda recently did a survey. Some interesting findings. I know I'm going to let you kind of tell the story. Talk to us about it a bit.
Right. So we found out, we surveyed about 800 different businesses, with going through, digital transformation. And interesting results that stood out for me was, about 3/4 of all the organizations that they were surveyed, that they use multi-cloud providers, right? Which is fascinating, that they have more than one public cloud, provider that they work with today, right? So I thought that was a fascinating one.
Yeah.
And about 56%, more than half today still struggle with having seamless connectivity to these cloud service providers, right? So they migrate their workloads, their applications and data from their legacy on-prem networks, data centers, to these cloud service providers, maybe to multiple availability zones, maybe, as we discovered that 3/4 of them might actually use some AWS, some Azure, maybe some GCP, to build a seamless connectivity across these sites seems to be still a challenge for more than of the folks that was surveyed. So that stood out for me as well.
Let's stop there. So
Sure.
Sinan, I will tell you, I saw this. Actually, I saw it last year, even before COVID. It really kind of, I think, caught us all by surprise a little bit. Everybody was so busy talking about hybrid cloud. I'm going to put some stuff in the public cloud and keep some stuff at my data center, private, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But what started happening, especially as Azure and GCP became quality offerings, right? The three of them, meaning the three big ones, they all started developing their own kind of specialties. Mm-hmm. So, if you were looking to do this, you want to do that in Microsoft, they do it best. Or you're looking to do that, GCP does that better than the other two. AWS probably had the broadest offerings, but still, you want Lambda function, whatever it is. Yeah. AWS has that, and the other two don't do it as well. So what organizations do, and you got to love the market, is rather than saying, I'm just going to go with one vendor, regardless, right? As long as they have that broad enough offering, they really did. They voted with their money and their pocketbooks, and they picked what was the best solution for that particular deployment, not what was best for the whole organization for everything. And so multi-cloud became, it kind of snuck up on people, but it became a very popular way these organizations are doing it. But I think, to your point, no one saw it coming, and so they didn't kind of put the glue together.
Yeah, the connective tissue together, right?
Yeah, that allowed us to go, to all three seamlessly, because it wasn't really set up for that. That wasn't the design kind of spec in the beginning. So I think that's what we're seeing, and I think with COVID, people did what they had to do quickly without thinking of a broader strategy, maybe, and it probably, added on to that. What do you think?
No, spot on. I completely agree. There is, I'm glad, first of all, that, folks voting with their pocketbooks and choosing state of art, right? Basically, instead of saying, well, I get a package deal, a bundle deal, no, I'm going to use what's best for the job, right? We only hope that that stays on, right? Because it creates innovation, competition, and obviously you still have a chance to have a breakout if you do things better than your competition, rather than dealing with financial models of bundling and pricing synergies. You basically put better technology forward. So I'm glad folks are going multi-cloud to leverage better functionality from the best provider, which gives us an interesting opportunity. Of course, independent vendors like Barracuda. Now, we're in the business of basically providing a control plane across these, I guess the old popular term used to be walled gardens, right? They do their own thing. They're kind of siloed, but it gives us an opportunity to kind of build these robust control planes where it, brings the glue that you mentioned, the connective tissue, all together. So you can have a single global policy that translates across from Azure, GCP to AWS. You have, security controls that are consistent, and then you can actually connect your services from one, site to another site on a different cloud provider. This gives us a tremendous opportunity, basically, to put that control plane, the connective tissue, on top of these distributed workloads and different service providers all together in a cohesive way. So I think it's a win-win for everybody, for the cloud service providers, for the independent vendors like us who put together connectivity and security solutions together.
Excellent. What else do we got from the survey?
Right. There was a couple interesting points around latency, right? That was surprising. About 70% of the surveyed, folks mentioned that they have performance issues with SaaS applications, right? I can understand to an extent. It was a large number, larger than I would have estimated. I would have still think something around 50-50. So 70% is a statistically significant signal, right? That everybody's complaining about some latency performance issues with SaaS. I guess it's partially growing pains, or maybe partially also, people working from home. The consumer internet is not where it should be. Not everybody has the luxury of fiber, but at the same time, I interviewed and have meetings with a bunch of CIOs, CISOs that work at large companies. They also had similar experiences when, we're talking about an employer with 50,000 plus employees, right? Even very robust SaaS solutions seems to have some performance challenges. So not very much surprised. The 70% number stood out for me, but also there's some great opportunity here, with solutions that can cache, content at the edge, can do quality of service for when it comes to companies, available bandwidth. So there's opportunity for vendors like us to improve that experience. As I mentioned earlier, security products should not only be purely focused on risk mitigation, they should improve day-to-day life, right? So this is an opportunity. We can help with improving latency when it comes to SaaS access from branch offices, from home offices, from HQs. Sure.
I think it also emphasizes that the edge, right? Edge computing is, because there's so many potential issues about why we have latencies in SaaS. Is it at the application server on AWS or Google or whatever? Mm-hmm. Is it over the CDN that a lot of these things are going over? Is it that last mile because people are working from home on DSL or whatever the heck they are? There's so many different kind of, it's like whack-a-mole. As soon as you hit one, the next one. I think the right answer to that, though, is if we can move more of this to the edge, right? We take out a lot of those potential bottlenecks, and just deal from there to there. And not only from the edge, but on device as well, like working on the endpoint. We're seeing, for instance, in security, I'm seeing log vendors now who are, using technology where they're actually analyzing logs on the endpoint.
That's right.
And then only shipping up what's needed, right? Makes sense. Makes sense. Less load.
Most certainly, and I want to bring back a point about the startup that Barracuda acquired, FIDE. We thought that the only way for us to improve experience and also unit of economics, right? Like we also want to be competitive from a pricing point, was basically to push a lot more of the computation to the endpoint, what we consider to be the true edge, right? So you're spot on, a lot more asynchronous logs, right? So we consume the logs on the endpoint, we refine them, and asynchronously we push them out, not in real time. But also when it comes to content inspection, right? If you're providing DNS, URL filtering, content filtering, well, guess what? A lot more of that, it can be done at the endpoint rather than creating these persistent tunnels and wrangling all the packets to an infrastructure to get security. So we don't subscribe to that view, right? Having persistent tunnels from endpoints to a vendor's infrastructure to get security is counterproductive. Actually, you should be pushing that logic all the way to the endpoint for better optimization and less hurdles, and less latency, of course, almost zero latency. Yeah,
absolutely agreed. Mm-hmm. What else do we got in the survey?
Well, there was one point that I don't want to take a lot of our time, is that, a lot of folks say that MPLS is expensive, it's not meant for the edge. So that's kind of an obvious finding. So, there's not much to say there. A lot more people are now a lot more decentralized. They have distributed teams. So that age of concentrating traffic into an HQ and then through an MPLS line, take it to data center, that's, the sun
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, sun is setting on that anyway. So that was not very surprising.
But the sun's been setting on that, quite frankly, right? As once we started people having their own device and being able to work from anywhere, you knew that the clock was ticking. This just accelerated it, right? But you know what I find interesting in all of this, Anand, is that, so I'm in security also 20, 25 years, at least, right? When I got into security, it was all network security. There was network security and there was endpoint security. So you had antivirus, whether it worked or not. And then you had your network security. You had your firewall, intrusion detection, stuff like that, scanning vulnerabilities. Here we are 20, 25 years later, and we still have that, security and the network kind of thing. We haven't really, even though we spend a lot of time on AppSec and DevSecOps and all that, we haven't quite figured out the network and security paradigm, right? Zero trust is one thing, but what in the survey do you think bears that out, or what can you point to give us some light there?
Very good point. So we have this, arbitrary line in the sand, a demarcation of some sort about endpoint security. You do a subset of things. You have network security. You did another. Luckily, I'm seeing a bit more of a convergence, or more than a convergence, actually, the disappearance of the distinct network security versus the distinctly endpoint security. So especially zero trust, right? What we see is that it's more around user identity. It's more around device identity. It's more around context. So we're actually abstracting away from concepts like network. So my solution, for example, doesn't care for IP address. There is no concept of IP address. There is only a user identity on a trusted device accessing an application. We don't care if it's on a this kind of a subnet versus that, if it's publicly routable or not. It simply doesn't matter. We just abstract it away from network. So it's tough, even though it will get categorized under network security, and I refer to it as zero trust network access, but it's a misnomer. It's actually zero trust access, because the network is completely abstracted away. So is the endpoint security, right? When you're doing a contextual decision about whether this device is secure, you're checking bunch of device attributes, collecting bunch of telemetry from endpoint security solutions, from other, SIMs, other, log aggregation solutions, and you're making a decision whether this device is safe or not. But you're not really providing an endpoint security in a traditional sense. It's more about, is the context of this device, given the request for this application, does it conform with the security policy? So we're kind of abstracting away from endpoint security and from network security, creating something more driven around identity and context.
I agree. We're doing a virtual event next week called Predict 2021. That's where we do all our predictions for the end of the year, beginning of the year, rather than a bunch of articles. And one of the panels on there, one of the sessions is that I think in 2021, identity and access control, right, IAM, or IAC, is going to be really a really hot topic for 2021, because all of this digital transformation, all of this moving to the cloud, all of these people working remotely, right? You're right. It's kind of almost negated so much of the network, right? Just when the network people were finally starting to understand security, we kind of threw that out. So we don't have to worry about that network. We don't have to worry about the MPLS. We don't have to worry about the VPN concentrators. And there was this whole infrastructure with billions of dollars invested in it that are now, I think, going to just be replaced by identity and access management, accessing cloud-based apps, no matter where you are and no matter what device you're on. And so the security challenge for this is, zero trust is one way of looking at it. But the security challenge is understanding who is accessing what, when, and how, and is it okay, right? And that's really what it comes down to. It's kind of replaced the whole thing that we've known for 20, 25 years. So it's going to be an interesting year.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I'll add a couple more angles to the prediction, spot on. But it's just not going to stay at user identity. It's going to be service identity, right? So individual applications are going to be identified by stronger means, right? There's going to be certificates assigned to them. There's going to be authorities assigning identity to a database, to a web server, right? And on the other hand, devices. There will be device identity strongly paired with a user identity. It will have its own life cycle and it will be managed. So through identity, we can definitely abstract away the notion of IP port, firewall rules. Doesn't matter anymore. Can this application, web server A, talk to database B? Because they're both identified strongly. Is there a policy that says A can talk to B? Yes. Well, let them talk to each other. Doesn't matter if they're on this, VNet versus that VPC.
Doesn't. I mean, because even take it one level down to the container, right? Kubernetes architecture. Can this container share information and these containers all have certificates now, right?
Exactly.
Each container has its own identity.
That's right.
And one container could be on one end of the earth and the other container's on the other end of the earth, and it really makes no difference. And so it's true. Of course, then you got to watch out for SolarWinds kind of things where certificates or identities can be, spoofed or what have you, and we see what happens there. But it's certainly interesting times. It's going to be an interesting year. Where can people get more information on this survey, Sinan?
We will definitely put it up on the website. It is already on our website, but we will also provide additional information for you if you want to.
Right, we'll put it in notes for people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, man, we're out of time. We went over time, but it was a great conversation. I figured let's roll with it. No. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on TechStrong TV. Congratulations on the acquisition by Barracuda. It's good company. I've worked with Barracuda a really long time. So wish you well there and wish them success. Come back and visit us and we'll talk some more.
We'll certainly do. Thank you, Alan. This was super enjoyable. Cheers.
All righty. Sinan Eren from Barracuda here on TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Up next is something I'm super excited about, the inaugural episode of the Haunted Hacker podcast. Mike Jones, who's one of the founding members of Anonymous, is hosting this podcast that we are going to be breaking up into 3 segments each week and running it over the course of the week. So here is segment 1 of the Haunted Hacker podcast. Let's give it a listen.
How's everybody doing tonight for episode 10? Wow, 10 of the Haunted Hacker. So a lot of good stuff has gone on this week. So we are actually being picked up by TechStrong TV to be hosted on their platform. We've built out our Discord server, and we picked up a lot of new people. I think we have like 10 new people in Discord, a couple new people to the crew. One of them is Ghost Exodus, and another one is a hacker from Uruguay that was on, both of them were on Darknet Diaries, and they have some really good stories. And next Saturday, we'll have a bunch of ex-hackers with stories together on the same podcast. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We've already had to ban one person because of inappropriate behavior or whatever. This is for the web, and it's for everybody. So if there's something you don't agree with or something you don't like, send me an email. I may or may not look at it, but we'll take a look. So tonight we have Kevin Fielder, who is a really good friend of mine. And I'm going to unmute him so he can speak. So a little backstory on me and Kevin. I met Kevin in London, and it was at the NIST conference. And he, myself, Greg Vandergast are all speakers for Sapphire. And I think David Parkinson's online as well. And he's from Sapphire as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm glad to have Kevin here. Kevin, long time.
Hey man, how's it going?
Excellent, man. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while since you left the UK, hasn't it? So.
Yeah, it's been like 4 months, I think now. But I don't feel like I'm that far away anymore because I think I've had pretty much all of us on the podcast with a few exceptions, but I'm sure that'll work out. So last time I saw you, you were CISO of Just Eat, and I know that you've moved over to FNZ Group. Why don't you start by taking us through what brought you into cybersecurity and kind of your path? You're muted, Kevin.
So I've got a bit of a sore throat, and I muted myself to cough, and then I realised that you're being draconian and not allowing us to unmute ourselves. So I was like, can't even speak. I've been silenced by the man. So I was CISO for Just Eat for just over 3 years, which is pretty cool. Got to kind of join there, build a whole team, do happy to talk about everything we did, but the whole kind of the whole building every part of a security team and function from pretty much nothing. So that's really exciting. And now I wanted to kind of move back into finance. I know it can sound a bit dull, but security is a lot more important when there's like billions of pounds at stake, right? So it's kind of, Just Eat and other kind of online store, other online stuff is obviously important. But there's kind of names and addresses and ordering, whether it's jeans or CDs, whatever, there's not as much at stake in terms of kind of if there's a small breach, it's not, it's bad, it's serious, but it's not catastrophic. Right. And obviously FNZ, they're one of those companies that you've not really heard of, but they're quite big. So we do kind of wealth management stuff, but it's wealth management for other companies. So Standard Life, Quilters, HSBC, all of those kind of people use the FNZ platform behind the scenes. So there's several hundred billion of assets under management. So it's kind of a much bigger deal if something goes wrong, right? So it's obviously a bit more scary for me, but also security is much more kind of part of the fabric. So they've had a really strong second line team that did some of the first line stuff and a good security culture, but they want to build a kind of a fully fledged first line security team. So operational security, AppSec throughout the SDLC, infrastructure, cloud, the whole piece. So kind of similar to what I did at Just Eat, just a bit kind of with a bit more at stake effectively. So it's kind of seemed like an exciting thing, and they wanted someone who was not a super kind of, there's anything bad with different types of CISO, but they didn't want someone who's come from a purely risk or non-technical background. They want someone who's kind of got a bit of a technical background as well, because it's a tech firm. So someone that can kind of understand the issues as well as doing the kind of risk and sort of paperwork side of things.
So at a top level view, how did you get to become a CISO? Where did you start in security, and what led you to the position of CISO?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those jobs where there's definitely not one way, right? You'll talk to 10 different CISOs and find we've all had different routes up. And just before I dive into that, one thing I would say is it's not necessarily for everyone in terms of, not because people can't do it, but you do have to become, as with a lot of stuff, as you get more sort of managerial, you can stay fairly technical. It's one of those careers where like I can still get my hand in and I still have to talk to pen testers and talk to developers and stuff. So I still got to be moderately technical, but I'm not going to pretend I'm hands-on anymore, not remotely. But equally, as you and many other people can attest to, you can do really well in security. If you want to be financially successful as well as kind of have a career or whatever else, you can do pretty well in security as a senior pen tester or a head of or team lead, senior manager, whatever the title is, of an AppSec function or an cloud function, whatever you're passionate about. So I would just couch that in. Don't necessarily think it's the place to be for everyone in security. It's if you really love the hands-on thing or pen testing or cutting code, whatever it is you love doing, follow that path and do something that's going to still like have a career that can like earn you a pretty good shit ton of cash if that's what you're about, and you can shape how things go and shape strategy a bit, but still keep your hands on. So don't necessarily kind of think that the pinnacle CISO, if you're someone who wants to really stay hands-on, the pinnacle could be, what you do, or being the lead pen tester for an organization or whatever your area happens to be. So I would just kind of say that a lot of people talk about like CISO being where you want to get to, but it's only where you want to get to if you enjoy that balance of being a bit technical, but also having to talk to boards and deal with risk and deal with second and third line teams and all the other stuff you have to do. So it's not necessarily what everyone's going to be happy doing. In terms of me, so I started off doing. Strangely, I started off kind of my career was I was running a small business, a little shop in a town called Hitchin, selling kind of gym supplements and workout clothing and stuff. And I also kind of like I had my degree was partly computing, and I've been quite into computers and tech stuff sort of most of my life. Whether it's monkeying around with playing with phones or playing games, computers, whatever else, building computers, all the sort of stuff we did as teenagers when you're a bit slightly geeky. But sort of I also like sport and gym stuff. So we were running a small shop with a friend, and then I kind of, because it was kind of a bit slow getting off the ground, and one of the things I learned is that whole go big or go home thing. So we didn't want to borrow too much money because we were scared of getting into debt. So we had this little business that was kind of ticking along and paying for itself, but not making a huge amount, because back in those days, like this was like early mid-90s. So if you weren't splashing adverts in like Muscle and Fitness and Flex and Men's Health and whatever the big magazines were, because it's kind of pre the internet being massive, you weren't doing loads of mail orders, so you're only kind of getting trade from local gym folk and a few people you knew. But you obviously had to spend thousands on the adverts. So we kind of had this thing where it's ticking over, but we hadn't had the bottle to borrow the thousands to do the big ads to get the mail order trade. So I then took a job just doing random call center stuff. I think it was for a bit of dental software of all things. So
nice.
Dealing with BNC networking and dentists trying to run software and stuff like that, which is fun. So kind of got into doing kind of an IT job doing that. And then after doing that for a little while, stepped away from this business, because one thing I also discovered was with a business like a shop, even if it's something you're passionate about, fundamentally it's still a shop selling stuff. Right. So it wasn't ever going to excite me enough. So I left that to my partner. And then kind of moved on doing kind of various tech jobs, kind of internal support, that kind of stuff. Worked for a little company doing spread betting and share trading, those sort of things. And then I was working for GE Capital, and I'd always kind of had a bit of I like tinkering with security. So even though I wasn't in the security team, I was the guy because I was in a project team that would do the building new firewall projects, or network security projects, or what do you want to do with IDS and playing around with Snort and stuff. So did a bunch of kind of security related projects and being as security adjacent as I could be. And then we got a virus outbreak. I can't remember what it was now, some random little virus in our office. And I managed to deal with it before Symantec had a fix out, and like just monkeying around in the registry, deleting some files, rebooting the machine. So it was obviously wasn't that ferocious a virus, because I could deal with it by just sort of changing some registry settings and deleting some files. But I worked out how to get rid of it before the AV got updated, and it happened to coincide with us having a new security manager start, and he was building a team, and he was like, "Do you want a job?" I was like, "Yes." And that kind of got me in security, and then just did a variety of things. I've always been a bit of a generalist, so kind of, again, that's probably a good thing for any kind of leadership role, but talking about CISOs in terms of having quite a broad experience. So I've done kind of internal support, I've done external support, I've done security work. After I did security for a little bit, I moved into architecture, because on the basis, probably a bit like Greg talks about quite a lot, that if you do things right at the design phase, you get rid of a lot of the security issues we're dealing with every day, right? Because you just built it right. You're never getting rid of everything, because there's always going to be time pressure, and you're never going to be perfect. But that kind of, so I moved into general architecture a bit, to sort of, but with a security focus that I tried to bring to things. Then some security architecture, and then a bunch of years kind of doing things at WorldPay in various security roles, building up a little internal team doing what we're doing. So we owned everything up to kind of live. So we were the kind of pre-go live team. So across AppSec and infrastructure and everything. So it's kind of like a little mini CISO world, but just for pre-go live, but it's quite broad. And I always had some interesting things there. We talked about how we look at making security profit centers. If you're a company with a lot of, especially SME companies, connecting to your systems, could you make the USP that you help them with their security, whether it's hosting stuff for them, scanning things for them, giving them kind of code and other stuff to work with. So we were looking at how can we help make security a profit center that we actually sell to our customers, as well as being kind of part of what we do. And then obviously that built up to kind of the head or title or whatever, for whatever titles matter, but that seems one of the ones that comes along. And then after that, I got my CISO job at Just Eat. And it's one of those things. It's they obviously took the flyer on me. You'll find, I think, if you want to get into the kind of CISO world, you'll probably, your first job will probably be with a company that either hasn't had one before or is a bit smaller or whatever else, and will take that chance on someone who's not quite there to step up, rather than, and obviously, as we all know, once you've got a title, whatever it is, whether it's whatever job it is, if you've got the title, moving to another job with the same titles, that'd be easier because you're kind of a known quantity. So it was just that stepping stone. So, I'm always going to be grateful to kind of Dave and the team at Just Eat for giving me that chance, because it's, hey, you're not proven at this job yet. Have the reins of a pretty chewy security budget, go and build us something. So yes, I think it's that, and I guess that ties back to, so I'm rambling a little bit, but I guess that ties back to a lot of that stuff about getting people in industry as well. It's that same attitude of finding people that you think are going to be good and giving them the chance, right? You always need that. But yeah, so I've always been a kind of moderate techie at heart, and just kind of done for me, what works for me is having that broad background. If you want to lead a team that does a bit of AppSec and security culture and infrastructure and cloud and security operations and all of the other bits, if you've got a broad background, you're probably going to understand a lot of that. So when you have a conversation with your team, you're not some numpty who doesn't understand anything they're talking about. You can have a sensible conversation about most of the stuff you're doing. And I think that's quite important, just to have their respect, and also help make sure you're doing the right things, right? Obviously, I always say, like a mid-level analyst probably knows more than me about what they do, and I'll always trust their opinion, but at least I can have a decent dialogue with them about it and kind of challenge what they're proposing and things.
Right. So now that it's post-pandemic, or kind of like, I guess we're still in the pandemic, because you guys are on lockdown. You guys are still on lockdown, like what, number 6 or 7 or?
Oh yeah, it's crazy, and it's it's utter madness. It's like, you can have Christmas. No, you can't have Christmas. Kids are going back to school, and literally the day before they went back, or the day they went back for some kids, I think, was like, oh no, you're not anymore. So yeah, it's literally it's a shambles, mate. It's terrible. But,
so
yeah.
Being a CISO during the pandemic and looking at how cybercrimes increased quite a bit, what is your biggest pain point as far as cybercrime goes? Do you guys see any of that traffic? Do you see any of the traces of cybercrime against F&Z Group? And if so, what is it and how do you guys address it?
So I think, I mean, obviously I can't talk in any detail about kind of my current company, as I'm sure you expect, but just in general, and obviously from the previous role as well, there's obviously an uptick in the kind of social engineering kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of stuff in the same way as if all businesses moved online and delivery and everything else, same thing, right? So if I can't do a bunch of the scams I do, I think the reason for the uptick is probably because an awful lot of criminals who were doing non-cyber or cyber and other stuff can only do cyber now, right? So, and you've probably seen them yourself. There's a bunch of, COVID, and now the vaccinations out. There's a bunch of vaccination-related phishing and SMS phishing and all that kind of stuff as well, right? So there's a big uptick in that kind of thing, which I think is to be expected. I guess it's the big difference between this and other kind of events is that it's so global, right? So if I have a good phishing thing or a good social engineering thing of whatever sort about COVID, or your friends in hospital, your family's in hospital, something's happened, blah blah blah, whatever it is, that works on a much bigger scale. Right? Any country where you might have to pay for healthcare, or where you might be worried about getting a vaccination, or where you might think you can jump the queue to get a vaccination sooner by paying or whatever else, that's going to work globally. Whereas most things, if there's a tsunami or or some weather-related incident, or a power issue, or whatever else, it's quite localized. So it might be big, but it's not. You haven't got that scale of I can use this, I can scale this up to work almost everywhere. So I think that's probably one of the big things that's caused it, right? Which is that global nature of it. As far as I think it's interesting. There's more, but a lot of it's more of the same, right? If you've been around, I guess you see WhatsApp chats with kind of like friends and family and stuff, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe people are taking advantage of this. It's like, right. That's what always happens. I guess if you've been around this for a while, you're never surprised by it, because every single event that's bad, whatever it is, bank breach, anything, you see on the tail of that, all of the people taking advantage of it. But if you're not in the industry, I guess it's like, I haven't seen that before. Oh my God, people take advantage of this.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really interesting. I've replied to some kind of friends and family people the other day. It's like, I think I must be too jaded because none of this surprises me anymore.
So we deal with a pretty unique situation here in the States, not only the pandemic, but the chaos of political tension and the riots, and nobody's really sure which way the country's going to go. And I see so much data coming across, like different threats that are coming up. I see a lot of false news, and it's kind of hard to keep up with it. It's like a flood of information. And I can only imagine, like, being a CISO, having to sort through what's real and what's not real. But like you said, being in the industry for so long, you kind of get a handle on, what you really need to focus on. Which brings me to another point. So we've talked before about, companies who hire ex-hackers or people that probably don't have the cleanest backgrounds to be on their security team. And my opinion, I've voiced this, over and over again, is that, you want someone who knows the other side, right? You want somebody who can identify traffic, not based on signatures on IDS, but what's behind the signature and what generated that alert. But that comes with a level of trust for the employee. So how do you view bringing in people with, let's say, not so white backgrounds? For me personally, it's not something that's a challenge. Obviously, if it's, I guess the more recent the not whiteness is, the harder it is to kind of justify it in terms of the risk. And that's the hard thing, isn't it? Because you want to be able to give people a chance. If you've done, whatever it is, but now you're, I guess, rehabilitated, for want of a better term, but, wanting to do the right thing. As we all know, half the reason why people reoffend is because they can't get a real life after prison or after being caught with anything, because fundamentally a lot of places won't employ you. But conversely, working in finance is a bunch of regulatory things. So sometimes, no matter, I'm still getting to grips with kind of all of the rules around that myself, but sometimes you might want to do the right thing
for someone or help them out, but then there's a bunch of background checks that they have to go through that are regulatory mandated. So it can be, I guess, in a non-regulated industry, it's probably a lot easier. So if you are someone who's trying to do the right thing but has a checkered background, I would suggest probably focusing on non-regulated entities as where you might want to work first, just because the CISOs or the team leads or whoever's looking to hire you will have an easier time because there's less rules about that. So even if they have some background checks, there'll be background checks the organization does that you can have a discussion with HR about. But if there's a regulatory rule that says you can't have people in with certain things, like especially, and it depends what they are, right? So if it's in finance, it's very focused on things like financial things. So if it's financial crime or you've got CCJs against you, those kind of things, so you're more likely to be someone who could be bribed and have financial issues, that's a big red flag. If it's someone who's maybe done some, again, this is me talking my personal opinion. I'm not a legal expert on this, but if you're someone who's maybe done some of the things that you might have been involved in or whatever else, where it's not financially motivated or financial crime related, it might be an easier sell to get someone in who's got awesome skills and is clearly trying to do the right thing to do that. And I guess there's maybe things on a company side you can do to help that, right? So if someone's coming in as a tester to do the adversarial testing stuff, equally, in the whole kind of least privileged access control model, right, you don't need access to much stuff anyway. So you can manage that by having the test controlled and making sure that person or anyone in those roles doesn't need, you shouldn't have the access anyway, right? So if you use the appropriate access stuff, same as me and my team generally should have access to see most stuff, what's going on, but we shouldn't really have access to any actual systems apart from in an instant. Right. So it's a day-to-day, someone coming in the security team, I guess I'm kind of arguing around here, but someone coming in the security team is actually a fairly low-risk one, because it's not like you're, say, coming in as a financial processor who could make financial transactions on behalf of the organization. You're coming in as someone who'll have access to no systems, but maybe test the security of them or whatever. Right. So I guess the short answer is yes, I think it's a really good thing. But I think, equally people, no matter best will in the world, if you've got regulatory requirements that say legally you can't hire people with certain backgrounds or with certain criminal records, there's nothing you can do as an employee of the organization to get around legal regulatory requirements.
Right. Like here, there's a lot of jobs for DOD and government positions, but I don't even bother to apply to them because I know that as far as security clearance, I probably would never get another one. But and also another frustration for a lot of people, I think, is choosing which company to go with when it comes to employment, right? So a lot of people that are new in the industry, they look for the most money and they look for, the quickest opportunity. I had an experience in Scotland with a company that offered me a CISO position, which was a disaster.
So I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't get paid for 6 months and it was just horrible. But there's companies out there that are looking to take advantage of people. So how would you suggest that people look at companies? I always tell people, when someone hits you on LinkedIn, look at their background, look at the companies, look at, do your own due diligence and OSINT on individuals. But that also goes with companies, right? Because there's a lot of companies that, may have a bad reputation. You and I both seen some of our friends go down with some really bad companies and cause a lot of issues. So what would your advice be to a newcomer coming into the industry as far as picking which company to go with?
Yeah, and it's gonna I guess it depends where you are in your career. If you're it's always going to be about that kind of, money's important. No one's going to say it's not. But fundamentally, most people don't leave jobs because of money. If you're on a salary and you're doing okay, it's going to be more about kind of what's the role like, how empowered am I, those kind of things. So do that. Look, whether it's Glassdoor or whatever, but look for reviews about the company, what it's like to work for. This is where one thing about having a bit of a network. I have a bit of a love-hate thing with the whole social media stuff, because I think there's an awful lot of people out there who spend their life on social media but aren't necessarily doing any good for anyone at all. And it's pretty vacuous, right? But equally, having enough of a network on LinkedIn or wherever means you'll probably know someone who works there or know someone who knows someone. So you can ask around a little bit as well to get that kind of real word of mouth about what it's like culturally. And those questions as part of the interview as well, right? So you can, most people, you've got to remember that a job interview is it's a two-way process. Right. It's always a two-way thing, right? So whatever your job is, when you're working somewhere, it's, am I getting what I need from the company? And that's going to be a bunch of things, and it'll vary from person to person. Salary, flexibility to see, look after your kids, autonomy. Some people like autonomy, some people like to be a bit more directed, but the right appropriate amount of directional autonomy for how I like to work, praise, promotions, training, whatever. And the company's like, are you smashing it? Are you delivering? Are you a good member of the team? All those things. It's always that two-way process. So you should feel completely comfortable to ask questions as part of the interview process. So it's often that kind of thing when you have that interview and you do the standard stuff, tell us about your career, tell us what we want. We'll ask you a bunch of questions. We might give you a test. And then there's like a 30-second bit at the end of the interview. Like, oh, do you have any questions for us? And it's like, what are the holidays like? And people always feel kind of bad to ask, but delve in, dig in. So, when I'm given ask them, what's your management style? If you give me a task, how do you want me to update you? And have that discussion. So I've recently obviously inherited a few people, and I've asked them how they like to have their interaction with the manager, right? So do they want weekly one-to-ones, bi-weekly one-to-ones, how often do they want to chat, how much chat do they want from me? Because obviously the one-to-one stuff is as much about, it's that kind of how you're doing as much to what you're delivering. It's more about, they're more of a kind of human, how are you kind of thing. So and do those questions. So delve into that, and don't necessarily get hung up on like the company. So everyone's like, I want to work for Netflix or Google or whatever, the trendy company. And they may not be great. They may not, they're probably not bad, but there's probably a lot of jobs in those companies that's pretty dull, like every company, right? And you might go to another company where I don't think you have to be passionate about your company to do an awesome job. So you can work for a company where you like, I'm not really that passionate about what we do, but I love doing a great job, so I'm going to smash it, and I'm going to, this is a really good opportunity for whatever it is, because they're building out their AppSec team, and I love AppSec, and I'm getting to not just do the application security piece and code scanning, but I'm getting to kind of shape how the team looks and help build the team, and how are we going to engage with the engineers and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're really passionate about that, it may not matter what the company is. If they're building a new team and you want to build things, that could be where you want to go to. So think about what you're passionate about, but definitely don't get hung up on the company as opposed to the team and the culture. And one of the things I often talk about is, in most companies, there's a bunch of rules you've got to follow, and there's a bunch of HR processes, and there's a bunch of whatever other things. But equally, within your team, if you're a really good team leader, you can make the team culture awesome as well. So the company may have great culture, but you can also improve that for your team. If you're a company where people work from home and people do work from different locations, fundamentally, half the company doesn't know where your team is or what they're doing, right? So as long as they're delivering those, you can make their life really good and give them more flexibility than maybe normal, because your team is delivering. As long as you're seen as delivering, people will then start asking you how you're delivering so much. Why is your team so happy? Why is your team engagement so good? And that can help make change in the rest of the org. So look for the team, look for the leader of the team, and make sure they're great. Then look for the rest of the company culture, and then probably finally the company. Unless you're really passionate, like say, I don't know, I really want to work in the charity sector because I feel I want to be helping people. So you might have a real passion about working in a certain place, but if you don't, that should probably come almost last. And it's the company culture, it's the team leader, the rest of the team culture, then the company culture, then the company. It's probably all right going. And just take your time, and equally also don't be scared of making mistakes. Right. Yeah. If you've got 7 jobs in a row and you've been in each one 3 months, that rings some alarm bells. But if you make a mistake and you're in a job for 3 or 6 months and then you move on, that's fine. No one minds that. As long as you don't keep doing it, you can make a mistake. So don't be too scared about having to find the perfect role. If you think this is probably good and you've got no alarm bells, and especially if it's your first job, whatever, take a fly at it, get stuck in and do a great job, and then see where you go from there.
So we do a lot of talks about hacking and social engineering and the offensive side of security, right? Mm-hmm. So have you ever had anybody that you interviewed that had done OSINT on you? Looked at your social media, dug your background, had every talking point. Have you ever felt like, or had somebody come in that had already done the OSINT on you as an individual?
A little bit, not to the point where it seems super creepy, but I've had people come in And interesting, some salespeople use that tactic as well. So they'll come in and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I saw you talk on this," and saw you. They'll do so with people in interview. It's probably a good thing. With salespeople, it's often just trying to get that hook. Hey, you're amazing. I saw this. Right. It's like if you get a popular LinkedIn post, you'll get a bunch of people reply to that going, "Oh, I saw your post, but you didn't really care, did you?" But yeah. So I've had a few people come in and done that bit of prep, and it's especially with like, sort of the more junior roles. There's been a couple of people that come in and be like, "Yeah, I saw your talk on this, and I thought that was really good, and I like the way you spoke about your team and stuff." And they've clearly done what we've just been talking about, right? Which is do that little bit of research and understand what the team's like and how you like to manage. And I guess, if obviously it's probably a bit easier with me because I talk about it quite a lot, but if you can see the team leader or the manager or whatever, or people from that team talking about their teams, not just what they deliver, but talking about team culture in public, that's a good way to get that sort of insight as well, because they're not going to come out and say a bunch of stuff in public that's completely untrue, because the team's going to go, that's not right. So you can't really talk about, hey, I built this awesome team, I'm really proud of them, we've got a great culture, they look out for each other, this happened and that happened, and it's going to be, it's fairly likely that it's going to be true, right? Because someone in the team, if your team's got a terrible culture, is going to post somewhere that's not true.
And we've both seen that, like on social media, where people are unhappy with what's happened at work or what's happened with their job, and they go directly to social media. I try not to do that, but I do try to warn people as far as like companies that are definitely not, on the up and up and kind of shady. But I think as far as social media goes, not a good place to voice your opinion as far as distaste for your position or issues you've had with a previous job.
Yeah, and you've got to be a bit careful, because it's also, you've got to remember going back that two-way thing, right? Yeah. You can have a bad relationship with the company or a team. It doesn't make it a bad team. It just means it wasn't right for you. And if someone was outwardly malicious, or like you say, didn't pay you or whatever else, because it's like a relationship with another human, right? You can have an absolutely terrible relationship with someone, and then you both go off thinking, what an arsehole, and then both have awesome relationships with someone else. Exactly. So so I think, be fairly mindful, unless it's legitimately kind of illegal, shady, bullying, not paying, whatever those things, in which case the warning may be worth it. And also remember that whilst it may not be fair, if you're too much of a troublemaker for other companies, your next company might be a bit like, oh, he seems really good, but they've caused loads of problems, and I'm not sure I want to risk having the same issue.
Yeah, so I've seen that too, and it's really difficult to conceive, because when I have problems with companies, I may mention a problem, but I don't mention a company publicly. I just try to steer people away and kind of give them a warning as to what to look out for. So New Year 2021, we're still in lockdown, still a lot of government and political issues. What is your predictions for 2021 as far as cybercrime and the whole, I guess, environment of, the internet?
My God, predictions. I think if anything over the last year, I'm going to swear, but who the fuck knows? Sorry, but I think, what's interesting is, and I think what's going to bring home a lot of the stuff we've been talking about for a while is the whole SolarWinds, Microsoft, FireEye, government stuff. Not only shows how far-reaching and how dangerous kind of supply chain compromise things can be, which is really hard to manage, because your supply chain and how far you go down the supply chain and blah, 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 it's hard to deal with. But also, we're going to start seeing those things that have been so successful become the norm. And then there'll be, so I think one of the things that I've been more sort of highlighting to the team and to my company, and I think it's worth highlighting to everyone, is you always remember, it may not be a month, it might be 6 months, but this month's nation state, once it's in the wild, is next month's Script Kiddie.
Oh, for sure.
And I know it's a bit more complex than that, because there was a lot of work went into this, but fundamentally the techniques and tools they used will now become techniques that everyone tries and techniques that everyone uses, because that's what they're learning. So, and that's now out in the wild. So obviously the specific code they use, right, that's going to be spotted by every bit of anti-malware solution out there. But the techniques they used and the way they did it and those kind of things, and even stuff like, you've probably read all the reports on it, but all the clever stuff it did, like turn itself off. Oh, I'm going to look. Oh, there's all this something on the machine might find me. I'm just going to turn myself off. I'll check again in a while. I'll try and disable the services. I'm on a certain domain. I'll turn myself off. I'm on a certain IP range. I'll turn myself off. All of these things it did to hide itself and then recheck and stuff that were really subtle. And I think and that's where it gets really hard, right? Which is the whole. And I think people need to be seriously concerned. If you've got any indication you were breached by this stuff, just updating to the latest version of SolarWinds or whatever isn't enough, because they were so good at hiding. You need to rebuild pretty much everything they could have touched, because they wouldn't have done the same thing on the next machine. They would have used that to get in and then done something else. So I think it's a bit of a tangent, but it's another wake up call for everyone that this stuff is real and really serious. And I think it will drive a lot of conversations. I think, the prediction for 2021 is probably the same as every year, right? Which is more of the same. There's going to be, we've got the pandemic, we've got political unrest in a lot of the world. And we've got people being concerned, and you've got the pandemic's leading to, especially where people are struggling. And if people, I count my blessings having a job at all at the moment, right? So there's a lot of people who are struggling because they're losing their jobs and they're struggling to find work, and all of those things, and are stuck at home. So you imagine you're stuck at home with your family, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and you've lost your job and you've got all this pressure piling up and you can't do anything about it because you can't go out to find a new one. So there's probably, that will increase the kind of level of disenfranchised people and the level of kind of unrest and unhappiness that obviously leads to, that can lead to more unrest, and whether it's even more kind of political unrest or people on the far right or far left getting into power when there's elections because they just speak out to those that are struggling or whatever else. So I think we can rest assured that whilst a bit of normality will return as the vaccine comes out and people can kind of go back to a bit of normality, I think there'll be still a lot of unrest and a lot of fear and stuff in the world that will lead to people being able to play up to that, whether it's social engineering, whether it's driving bad behaviour. If you think you're at risk of losing your job or you're unhappy, you're probably that much more likely to be bribable or get involved in the wrong things, right? So there's probably just a general increase in all of those people-related stuff, so social engineering and crime and people in work being unhappy or potentially more tempted to do crime, whatever else. So that will probably continue to increase. Obviously, there's the whole remote working stuff. I guess I've been a bit blessed that where I've been has been companies that had that in place and were pretty good at it already. But I know a lot of companies struggle with that, and there's literally, there's no way people are going back to 5 days in the office if they don't have to. After proving for a year and a half you can work at home 5 days a week, there's very little argument companies can make that you can go back, you have to back in office 5 days a week. So that whole remote working thing is going to continue. So I think as that continues, we have to get better and better at it. There's a during the pandemic, there's probably a little bit of, like in say way when a company has a breach and they come out really well and talk about it, people are pretty forgiving, right? Because you're doing the right thing. Equally, during the pandemic and during having to work offline, work at home, people and regulators and legal and customers and shareholders and whatever else will probably be a bit more forgiving if there's an issue related to that because you've had to do it because of the pandemic. But as we start to allow more flexible work and it becomes the norm, we have to make sure we nail that down, right, and make sure we've got the right stuff in place for that to be safe. And I think the other thing I'd love to see more of is, which I don't know, I hope it happens this year or more, is security being much more intelligent around data and behavior and things. So we have so much data on what people are doing, where they are, what they access, how they're accessing it, what device they're using, etc., etc. And that's such a rich amount of data that most organizations aren't using yet to go, okay, you're on the same device at the same location, working in normal hours. We can be quite relaxed about you because it's not, you're accessing the same things, and it's then I don't know, but 2 or 3 in the morning, you're accessing stuff. A bit strange, but we know you've got a kid, so you probably just got woken up by your kid and can't sleep, and you're doing normal things. So you're just doing your normal work, pretty low risk. 2 or 3 in the morning, you're accessing a bunch of stuff you never accessed before. That's a red light, right? So using that intelligence to be much more clever about how we protect things and make data safe everywhere and those kind of things. So I think, so for me, it's just more of the same, but with a big focus on kind of social and people and those kind of stuff. And silly breaches, like when it gets back to summer here in the North Hemisphere or summer in the Southern Hemisphere now, people just being on a call and talking about sensitive stuff in their garden and those kind of silly little things where someone might overhear something. So I think it's that behavioural piece again that we have to kind of keep an eye on.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel. featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we have something old from DevOps Experience, Tammy Buteau, who's Senior Site Reliability Engineer at Gremlin. She talks about how to scale, how to actually build and scale an SRE team. So let's give this one a listen.
My name's Tammy Bryant, and you can reach me on Twitter, TammyXBryant, or you can drop me an email to tammy@gremlin.com. 500 million users. That's how many users I needed to scale up our systems to be able to handle and deliver all of our awesome services to in the past. 500 million. That's really large scale. And not only was it that number that we had to be able to reach, but we actually went from 400 million to 500 million in 1 year. So you can imagine that's a lot of capacity planning, a lot of scaling out, a lot of site reliability engineering work, a lot of preparing for different failure modes, running at large scale with, tens of thousands of machines. That is a lot of work to prepare for. But the important thing there for me was also being in touch with all of the different teams, knowing what the plan was, knowing what the marketing team was planning to do, knowing what the campaigns were going to be, knowing what ads were going to be out in the world, knowing which different countries and locations we were looking at focusing on. So that's something that I want to talk to you about today. When you do have these really large, big projects that you're working on, huge new launches, or you're rolling out to a larger number of people, or you're about to do a massive campaign, how do you actually build up and scale your site reliability engineering team to handle that scale? There's a lot of different failures that have been happening around the world over the last few years. The internet continues to break in different ways. Black Friday failures are very common, and we're coming up to Black Friday really soon. A lot of technical issues have actually cost retailers billions of dollars. Banks break all the time. I used to work at a bank, so I know this myself. I was there for 6 years. We would see all sorts of things not working: internet banking, ATMs, just lots of big problems. And, the real impact there is folks can't get access to their money, and then they're not able to buy food for their family. That's really bad, obviously. So site reliability engineering, it's all about making sure that that doesn't happen. Airline incidents, there's been a lot of problems there with just being able to rebook, to change flights, to use loyalty points, to make sure that things are working correctly. Even if we can't fly right now, we still have maybe trips that we've already booked that we need to modify. So there's still a lot of computer problems impacting the airline industry. This is one of my favorite quotes. Talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. So it's really important to make sure that you build an amazing team of folks that understand reliability work and understand running systems at scale as you build out your business. You can have one amazing person that can come in and be very talented, and they'll win a few games. But if you really want to win the championships, those days where it's we're going to launch to, hundreds of millions of users, we're going to push this new product feature out to people all over the world, that is a championship moment, and it really requires an amazing team. So what do SREs actually do with their time? A lot of people have different types of ways to think about this. For me, I like to think about it in terms of what are the business needs and what are the customer objectives. So say, for example, if you're running a site that is perhaps an e-commerce site, customers need to come on, they need to be able to browse the catalog, they need to add items to their cart, they need to then be able to have a list of those items, they might want to refer back to it, they might want to change items out or increase or decrease the amount of items in their cart. Then they want to make a purchase. After that, they want to get that shipped to their house and they want it to arrive exactly as they ordered it. How many times has that not worked for you? I can count, numerous times that shopping experience just hasn't worked for me. What's an SRE's role there? So if you really break it down, an SRE is responsible for making sure that, for example, Payment processing is running correctly as customers expect. The website is up and running so people can actually reach it. The services are running as fast as they should be. So making sure that we don't have really big problems in regards to latency or packet loss. There's a lot of different work that SREs do. And then also monitoring and alerting on the systems, configuration management, automation, being able to make sure that they're not having to manually do work all the time to fix issues, for example, restoring or fixing problems related to databases or backups. So if you don't have an SRE team, that's totally okay. You don't need to. You can just start thinking about how to think like an SRE. So an SRE's mission is to protect, provide for, and progress the software and systems behind services with an ever-watchful eye on durability, availability, latency, performance, and capacity. And I think if you're passionate about this and you're interested in this, then you can do this. You can start to think like an SRE, and then you can find and hire other people that think like this too. So how do you actually build out your SRE team? That's something that can be quite difficult for a lot of folks. I think a good place to start, though, is inside your own organization. So look around and see who's curious about how systems fail or how systems break in different ways. Who's passionate about making sure that services are up and running for customers? Who's someone that actually tries to talk to different teams to make sure that people are happy using your product and they do really deeply care about that? Who takes reliability and durability serious? You know, it's someone that you need to be able to trust. Some cool tips for you. These are some of my secret recipes for building out an SRE team. So one is there is actually a school for SREs now. So it's called Holberton School, and they're training the next generation of SREs. If you look on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find a lot of SREs. That's a great place to look too. So there's actually almost 200,000 SREs on LinkedIn, and the SRE community is growing rapidly. If you compare that to DevOps engineers, it's actually over 500,000 DevOps engineers on LinkedIn. And a lot of the time, I would say, if you're in the DevOps space, you can think like an SRE, and you might already be thinking like an SRE, especially if you own and are responsible for production systems, and it's your responsibility to keep them up and running, to alert on them, to monitor them, to make sure that software is running at scale, to handle things like auto scaling, to handle backups and restores of very important, critical customer data, then you are thinking like an SRE. So this is the school that I mentioned, Holberton School, and I'm actually a mentor at this school, and I think it's an amazing school. If, post-pandemic, one day, if you are in San Francisco, you should definitely check out their campus. It's really cool, and they actually get their students to do very practical hands-on work. So even though it's a school, they learn by doing, which I think is amazing. I did that myself when I went to university. I studied computer science and programming, and my college was in Australia, and it was a very practical school. And I think that's a great way to be able to learn. You know, you need to learn to code. You need to learn about infrastructure. You need to learn about networking. I think it's really handy to understand security. And then you need to be someone that can learn and pick up new technologies very fast, and then also debug them and understand what happens when things aren't working correctly. Is this what I should expect to see? So yeah, that's how you actually do hire your SREs. Think outside the box, look within your organization, but also look at this amazing school and other new things that are coming up like this. Something very important to hire for is folks that are trustworthy. And so why is this important? So really an SRE's responsibility is to make sure that you can trust them with your very critical, sensitive customer data. They're usually going to have quite a lot of access to your systems. And a good tip for interviewing for SREs to identify if they're trustworthy is you say, hey, what if we were to lose a database backup? What would you do? And then if they just go, oh, that's not a big deal, or I don't know, I guess I'd be like, well, I'm not sure. Maybe I might tell someone we lost it. that's not really the answer you want. You want someone that's going to take this a lot more serious. You would get them to say, okay, if we lost a database backup, I'd check if we had another copy of that backup. I'd see if we were able to then restore that backup. I would then try and investigate how we could make sure we didn't continue to lose backups, because we don't want that to happen. So I'd prevent that from happening in the future. I would do a postmortem on why we actually lost the backup. I would talk to different people to understand all those different failure modes that led to that happening. That's someone that's taking it really serious. Like, you want someone that's going to be trustworthy and take ownership and be accountable for making sure that systems run. Another thing that's really important is to set SREs up for success. I think that's really important for every single engineer, if you're a hiring manager or if you're bringing new people into your team. You also need to understand, what does success look like for these SREs? And you need to tell them as well. So, for example, these are the metrics that we care about at our company. We care about being able to service these specific customers. Maybe you have some VIP customers that you need to service. Or maybe you want to be able to make sure that you don't have any regressions in latency. Maybe you want them to do some performance tuning work. Maybe you want to make sure that they don't have to do manual work to be able to handle a large fleet of servers. You want them to automate that work. These are all really different things, but if you're not clear about what you want your SREs to do, then they won't know exactly what you expect of them, and they might do a range of different things, and then you won't really be happy with the results because it wasn't what you were expecting. So it's really good to just set expectations up front, tell them what success would look like by the end of 12 months, give them some projects to roll out, and then get them to actually teach other teams about reliability engineering and get other teams involved in this whole journey. Make it a really positive experience. Something important to think about is KTLO. So this is keeping the lights on, and it's a really important part of an SRE's work day to day. So when you think about reliability, I like to say this is availability, making sure that services are up and running and usable by customers, and then durability, making sure that you never lose data. But how do you make sure that you can keep the lights running? There's a lot of work that you need to do here. And I also think it's an important thing to measure for SREs. So how much of their time are they spending on KTLO work? This could be operations work, incident management, postmortems. Is it like 50% of their time? Is it 80% of their time? Are they able to actually use the rest of their time to do other types of work, like prepare for new feature releases or prepare for new product launches, make sure that everything's going to be good when that gets rolled out into production? Or are they just slammed with KTLO work? And then ideally, the goal there is you can reduce the KTLO. So you want to try and get a reduction in incidents to have less operating work that you need to do, operations work, and you want to be able to just really scale up this team so they can automate more of their day-to-day work. So instead of having to hire tons and tons of SREs, you're able to actually scale out your team in a way that's manageable. Another thing I really recommend is distributed teams. Something that I've always had, which really works, is follow the sun teams. So being able to have a team, say, for example, in the USA, in Europe, or in Australia and the USA, it means that you can time shift. So you can have your team working throughout the day in the USA, and then as they log off, they hand it over and say, hey, this is where I'm up to right now. Can you finish doing these database promotions that we have that we need to do? Or can you make sure to finish off this work overnight? And of course, they'll be on call. So it means you don't have to get woken up in the middle of the night. No one wants to do that. It's really hard to work well on incidents at 3 a.m. in the morning. So I'm definitely a fan of this idea of distributed teams and follow the sun. There's a lot of places that you can definitely hire SREs. So check out Australia. That's where I'm from. There's quite a lot of SREs there. And then also Dublin too, because a lot of companies have moved their offices in Europe to Dublin. So there's a lot of folks that are living there. And then of course the USA, San Francisco, New York, and then just really working remotely across all of the USA. If you join our Slack, gremlin.com/Slack, then you can actually find over 5,000 folks in there that are either practicing site reliability engineering or chaos engineering. And there's a jobs channel, so check it out. You might find someone that you want to join your team. So what are the important SRE team responsibilities? Once you've found all your folks, you've interviewed for the right skills, the right qualities and attributes, you've created your team, maybe you've moved some folks from different departments or you've rebranded some roles. Now you want to figure out what are their responsibilities. I think the number one thing is that your SRE team is there to protect. They're there to make sure that systems are up and running all the time, that data is never lost or destroyed. And if the SREs aren't doing this, then who is? is. Another important quality is that your team should always be focused on bias for action. You really want to encourage them to get work done that is impactful and meaningful and provides value. This really encourages folks to stop, getting stuck in the weeds. It enables folks to pop the stack, to be able to not have analysis paralysis. You really want to say, hey, like, what are we going to do to just make this even 5% better, or to make this 10% better, or 20% better? There's got to be something we can do to move it a little bit forward so that we can create a better place for all of us to work and a better experience for our customers. Another thing I recommend is a captain's log. This is pretty extreme, but if you've got way too many incidents and you haven't been able to get them to be lower, something I recommend doing is a postmortem for every single page. So by that, I mean, if you're using PagerDuty, actually spend a week doing a postmortem on every single page that gets fired via PagerDuty. Not many people have done this in the past. I've done it. It's awesome. You should definitely do it. Not forever, because it's a lot of work, but definitely that you need to fix. Something that I recommend doing is chaos engineering. So this is actually a practice where you thoughtfully inject failure and identify weaknesses in your systems. So often you could inject failure, you know it's coming, you go, okay, we want to inject we want to run a black hole attack on this service, we want to make this service unreachable, and then you can say, we expect this to happen, like we expect the service to gracefully degrade, the UI should still work, people should still be able to add items to cart, everything should be fine. And you run that attack and then see what the results are. Did you get what you expected? Was the experiment a success or no? The other thing I recommend is fault injection, but unknown unknowns. So injecting failure where you're really not sure what's going to happen when you inject that failure. So for example, if you run a packet loss attack, what do you expect to happen? Maybe you're not sure because you've never done it before. You don't even have really great tools to monitor the impact of a packet loss attack. Maybe you don't have awesome network monitoring tools. So this is really an unknown unknown. You're really not sure. It's uncharted waters, but it's an important thing to do as well. It's better to do it yourself rather than wait for it to happen. There's some great tools that you can find online. Like, for example, PagerDuty is a library that's on GitHub that you can check out. I recommend that. Also, I think it's really good if you're using Slack to use Slack bots. This enables your teams to just understand what's going on. You can post all sorts of updates. You can use it to quickly launch up things like who's on call right now for this specific service, and then ping them automatically. Another thing to check out is Hermes, which is also a GitHub project. And this is really like an SRE task tracker that logs events, generate tasks, and lets you be able to attach those to certain folks and teams. And then also definitely focus on improving your monitoring and alerting. This is really like the foundation of SRE when you look at the SRE pyramid. And a lot of the time, it's just not done well. So it's really important to not only just, turn those agents on and have them running and reporting, but you want to validate that you're actually seeing what you expect to see in your monitoring dashboards. You want to validate that your alerting works as expected. You want to make sure that you've got your primaries and secondaries set up, because when you're in the middle of an incident, that's not the time to be fixing this sort of stuff. You need to do it before. Self-healing systems. So this is really like the advanced work that you'll head towards as you scale out your team and you really level up. Then you can do all sorts of great automation work where really like the robots are running things for you. So you don't need to do promotions of databases. They're just happening. You don't need to run backups and remember to do them. They're just happening. You don't need to even run restores to check that backups are working as expected and you're able to restore from a backup. This would just happen with self-healing systems. So the question that you might be wondering now is, do you really need an SRE team? I would say yes. If you care about reliability and you want to service your customers' needs, it's really important. And if your SRE team isn't doing it, then who is? So remember, build a solid team with your core values, inject chaos and trigger faults, automate, monitor and alert, take responsibility, auto-remediate, reduce pages, reduce pain, and care deeply about your customers. Some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, others make it happen. Michael Jordan. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, January 18th, and here I am with today's headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article about the value of DevOps in developing and delivering high-performance applications. You know, as more organizations embrace digital transformation, incorporating DevOps practices can help them deliver applications that provide higher business value, which is one of the outcomes that digital transformation strives to achieve. As we've said many times before, DevOps incorporates people, processes, and technology. And this article looks at the value of each of those three components in helping deliver software that improves business efficiency and enables a higher quality user experience. You know, for companies looking to understand the impact DevOps can have on software development and delivery, or for those just looking for a refresher, this article is definitely one worth checking out. Also, we have an article that looks at AI ops in the service management space. With so many organizations undergoing the digital transformation, many infrastructures, IT infrastructures are morphing and changing, and as a result are becoming way too complex for mere mortals to manage. The amount of data being generated and the number of service alarms far exceed the capacity of any human to meaningfully read, analyze, and respond to them. AI ops can address this exponential rise in data, using artificial intelligence to continually monitor and analyze changes in the IT infrastructure in real time. By combining these insights with service desk automation, organizations can benefit from a closed loop of discovery, analysis, detection, prediction, and automation. From there, it's but a hop, skip, and jump to self-healing IT. And at the pace of change we're seeing occurring these days, that's definitely a worthwhile goal. All right, over on Container Journal, IBM has allied with GitLab to advance AI development on the Red Hat OpenShift platform. Specifically, GitLab's CI/CD platform will become an element of IBM's Cloud Pak offerings. Cloud Paks are a series of microservices-based frameworks built using containers that make it easier for developers to consume IBM software. This latest alliance extends GitLab's existing relationship with IBM into the realm of applications that use AI technologies made available through the IBM Watson portfolio. Through this approach, IT organizations will be able to deploy an instance of the GitLab CI/CD platform alongside the Red Hat OpenShift application development and deployment platform, which is based on Kubernetes. AI-enabled applications can then be developed and deployed on multiple clouds as well as in on-premises IT environments. Speaking of AI, Slim.ai launched a DevOps platform that makes use of machine learning algorithms to resize and optimize containers before they are deployed in a production environment. The AI as a cloud service will first analyze the contents of a container and then remove any unnecessary code and, when appropriate, reorganize the code and replace the container with another one that has been optimally configured for a production environment. The resulting container is typically anywhere from 10 to 30 times smaller than the original. It also can advance best DevSecOps processes by making it easier to identify code with known vulnerabilities that might have been encapsulated by a developer inadvertently. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have news that DigitalOcean has become the latest service provider to join a mutually agreed Norms for Routing Security, also known as Manners initiative, led by content delivery networks and cloud services providers to reduce common routing security threats. The company is in good company. Other service providers that have committed to Manners are Akamai, Amazon Web Services, Cloudflare, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and VeriSign. All are working toward mitigating leaks and other pesky routing security issues that stem from misconfigurations. The ultimate goal is to keep the data running over cloud service provider infrastructures as secure as possible. And really, who doesn't want that? Also, we have a really interesting article on the security implications of using object storage versus file storage. Object storage is favored by many for its ability to scale limitlessly and the fact that it allows users to quickly access data from any location. File storage, meanwhile, provides extreme simplicity, particularly when it comes to file sharing and local archiving of moderate data volumes. But the major differentiator between the two, especially when making a choice to upgrade or replace existing IT infrastructure, is security. Which is more secure? Read the article and find out. All right, just a reminder that this week, January 20 and 21, Wednesday and Thursday, is our annual Predict Virtual Summit. And I highly encourage you to join us for what is sure to be a great event, jam-packed with some amazing speakers. Head on over to Predict 2021 to check out the agenda and register. Also, I hope everybody has a great week. We've got more headlines tomorrow. Until then, have a great day and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Tim Francis, who's the Enterprise Cyber Lead at Travelers. Tim, so thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So I know this has been a very tough year, 2020, and especially in the cybersecurity space, when you wrap in everything that's been going on worldwide with the pandemic and the folks working from home and everything that has gone along with that from a cybersecurity perspective. Ransomware has proven to be a very, very large problem this year. So wanted to talk with you a little bit about, what you guys are seeing on the landscape, and, maybe you guys can offer up a couple tips and tricks and things that organizations need to keep in mind when it comes to ransomware. But first, I wonder if you can kind of walk me through what you guys are seeing in the landscape right now as it pertains to ransomware.
So we've seen really for the last more than 12 months, and certainly predating COVID, unfortunately, a very significant rise in ransomware, and really across all industries and really across all sizes of organizations within really any industry vertical. If you go back as far as 2017, we've saw essentially a quadrupling of ransomware through 2019 in terms of frequency. And really in the last quarter of 2019, tremendous spike up. And that's unfortunately carried through 2020. Yeah.
But it's a huge increase. It's like fourfold, right? Or something along those lines. What is it that really kind of caused that spike over the past 12 months or so? Even, considering that, the pandemic didn't start until say March or so.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's probably less to do with the pandemic. There are some things about the pandemic and the working remotely and the more people working remotely that increases the attack surface. But really, I think that the rise in ransomware would have happened regardless. In fact, I'm sure it would have happened regardless, because what's motivating the numbers to increase is a couple of things. One is there's a rise of sophistication of the attackers. And going back just even a couple of years, the MO really was they would cast a wide net. They weren't really targeting any specific organization. They didn't really care. It was just if somebody happened to click on it, they'd ask for a couple of $100 in cryptocurrency. And if they got paid, great. And if not, somebody would eventually. And that's how they made their money. And they quickly got better software and technology that allowed them to better encrypt the systems that they were in. So they actually could hold you hostage. Additionally, they're spending a lot more time doing reconnaissance and knowing who they have attacked. And so building up a better idea of whether you're a small company, large company, mid-sized company, and figuring out what your pain threshold is and how much you can pay. Right. And so certainly they'd rather attack a large company and get a large payday, but they're happy to take money from a small or mid-sized company, and they'll structure their assessment based on the size that you are, or the size they think you are, and try to negotiate with you and pull out an amount that you're willing to pay. And that's different for every organization, and not every organization necessarily needs to pay, but that's what's changed a lot in the dynamic.
So when a hacker infiltrates a network, are you noticing, or do you guys have you seen any visibility into whether they kind of get into the network and they just kind of sit there for a while and just wait for the right time, or is it almost kind of an immediate thing? They get into the network and then they lock it down.
Yeah, that's the change. It used to be an immediate thing. It is no longer an immediate thing, and almost never an immediate thing. They will sit in the network and they'll do a couple of things. They're not really sitting dormantly either, right? They're actively engaged in fact finding, data mining, right? And so they're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is, again, they want to understand who they're in, right? And sometimes when we talk about organizations being targeted, it's less often, certainly happens, but less often that they're going after an account or an organization. It's more they target a vulnerability. Now that they're in, they're figuring out who they've gotten into. But while they're in, they're kind of figuring out, oh, what data is interesting and important and valuable to this organization, right? So if they can then, when they do launch the exploit, go back and say, by the way, we have access to all of your employee salaries. We know all of your client contract information. And oh, by the way, if you don't pay us, not only would we not let you have your decryption keys back for your system, but we're going to publish that information, right? So now, even if you might otherwise back up your system, there's this threat that they're going to release important data. And it may not be necessarily the kinds of data we think about of social security numbers and credit card. Could be that, but it could just be sensitive financial or corporate information that you don't want to be out in the public.
Sure. Makes sense. So what advice do you have, if any, regarding cyber insurance for organizations? Obviously, you're with Travelers, so sure. There's a bit of an insurance thing there. But
right.
Have you guys seen maybe an increase in organizations asking about cyber insurance? And are there maybe particular degrees of cyber insurance that organizations kind of need to think about?
Yeah, let's take the second part of that first, right? So lots of companies of all sizes buy cyber insurance. They don't all buy the same thing, right? And that's probably no different than any other line of insurance, certainly in a commercial sense.
Sure.
So even if you're a small organization, there's likely to be cyber insurance solutions that meet your needs. Certainly if you're a larger organization, solutions that meet your needs. At the end of the day, particularly around ransomware, it's not just having a product that will help pay the losses in terms of return the economics, right? That's certainly part of it and what part of any insurance is about. But it's having access to the network of experts that we have at our disposal, so that if your system is encrypted, for example, right, and you have a small IT department whose job is to keep the company running, they may not have the sophistication, right, to deal with that event or the expertise. So we have a network of individuals, whether it be forensic specialists, frankly, if and when there's a decision made to pay the ransom, which again, doesn't always have to be, but sometimes it is, right? We have access to people that can negotiate with the threat actor to lower that ransom. And ultimately, unfortunately, if sometimes it needs to get paid, we can help facilitate that transaction through our network of experts too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about what your thoughts were on ransom negotiators, and it seems to be kind of
new job description for some folks. And it's one I don't think we would have even thought about maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. And it didn't need it 2 or 3 years ago, largely. Right. And unfortunately, it's necessary. And I do want to make the point, right? We don't make the decision for our customers. And every situation, while they have similarities, is different, right? And the decision to pay is dependent on each event and the impact that that's having. And so we can bring in, again, experts that, not only help facilitate or negotiate the transaction, but are really helping the customer decide, do you need to pay, right? Because even if you put the money aside, nobody wants to pay a bad guy that's gotten into their network, right? Who wants to do that? We don't, and so it's, can you back up? And if so, okay, what's the length of time and the cost that's going to take? Versus, okay, maybe it's distasteful it is. Maybe if you pay the ransom, you can get back up days or weeks earlier, and you have to decide what's right. And so there's a lot more on that end of the decision making that goes into it than you might otherwise think about or know about. But that's the crucial component.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys see for the landscape ahead? Maybe moving into 2021, do you guys expect to see an even greater increase in ransomware, or do you kind of maybe see the market kind of I don't want to say settling out, but maybe at least leveling out a little bit so that we don't have such a huge spike again?
So, unfortunately, nobody's got a crystal ball, and I don't pretend to have one either, right? But what we're seeing is threat actors that are able to penetrate networks and extract money, and they have, frankly, very little chances of being caught or punished. So until that changes, I don't expect there necessarily to be a change in bad guys trying to access money. I think what is important and what we're seeing and certainly advising customers, and we have not only people that work on, post-event walking you through it, but helping customers avoid these situations in the first place. So more emphasis on making sure best practices controls are in place, whether that's multi-factor authentication, not allowing what we call remote desktop protocol to be open, and certain technical things that are really essentially low-hanging fruit in terms of cybersecurity things, making sure that there's more attention to those things, I think will be important through 2021.
All right. Well, Tim, thanks so much for walking me through it. I think we're going to have a lot more conversations about ransomware before we get a handle on this this malware. It's such a nuisance. It's beyond being a nuisance at this point. So, if we've got the U.S. government stepping into, and we know we got big trouble if the government's getting involved. So Tim, thanks again. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we'll see you again soon on TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me. I'll be back anytime you want.
All right. Sounds great.
Okay. Take care.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Chief Content Officer at Media Ops. And I am just thrilled to pieces to be introducing a brand new segment that we have on TechStrong TV, which will also be running on the DevOps.com website. It is a panel discussion that I'll be having monthly with DevOps Institute ambassadors. You see 3 of them right here on the screen with me. It's as I said, it's the first in what I hope will be a monthly series of monthly panel discussions with these ambassadors and other ambassadors on the featured topics that we have on DevOps.com. The first inaugural discussion will be on enterprise digital transformation, and the featured topic will be changing every single month. So this week it's enterprise digital transformation. Next month it will be on cloud native. So I'm looking forward to all these discussions, but I want to go ahead and kick off this first one with our speakers today. First up, we have Sean Davis, who is Information Security Advisor, DevSecOps at TransUnion. Hi, Sean. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Charlene.
Next up, we have Jennifer Fisher, who is Executive Director of the Center for Innovation and Professional Studies at Felician University. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today. Good to see you.
Thank you, Charlene. Pleasure to be here.
All right. And last but certainly not least, we have Pankaj Gupta, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing, Cloud, ADC, and SD-WAN at Citrix. Pankaj, thank you so much. As always, great to see you.
Thank you, Charlene. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, as I said before, the topic of this panel discussion is on enterprise digital transformation, which I know is a huge topic to swallow. There are so many things that we can say about enterprise digital transformation, but it's certainly a topic that has been on a number of organizations' minds, especially since the onset of the pandemic and the rush to basically align their business practices with digital transformation efforts to be more productive and to stay relevant in today's fast-paced business environment. But as I said before, a lot of things have changed since the onset of COVID, and I want to kind of maybe set the stage a little bit by asking you guys, where do you think digital transformation initiatives have kind of progressed since the onset of COVID-19 and that rush to remote work that so many organizations have had to kind of go through? Whoever wants to start.
I can take the first crack. Charlene, this is an excellent question. The impact of COVID is twofold. First of all, is realization by IT and business for the need of the digital transformation. So that's first is the faster realization of need for digital transformation. And second thing is about execution speed of digital transformation has increased tremendously due to COVID in last 1 year or so. IT and business more in lockstep than ever before. IT is more aligned now with business outcomes. As in last 12 to 18 months, we have seen 4 phases of it. First was, it started with business continuity. How do I get my business moving in this new COVID environment? Then focus moved into employee productivity, because as they started working more from remote. And then the more people started working or more workers start working from remote, then security become very paramount, that how do I secure all of them? And I think the next phase which is coming is that digital transformation will be more about hybrid workforce. Some of the employees coming back to the office. So that's the 4th phase which I see for that. And in this environment, talking to customers, I have seen CIOs, the number 1 priority is to keep employee engaged, remain productive from anywhere, from any device they are working. They want reliable connectivity for every employee, whether they are working from home. They also want to ensure that same application experience, whether they were in office or now working from home. But what is also keeping them awake, that now these workforces working from home, and home networks are not as secure as the corporate infrastructure. So when employees access these applications or direct internet access, their endpoints or home network doesn't become an entry point for vulnerabilities into the infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I echo the need for a focus on security and a remote workforce. I think that really will become the foundation for digital transformation going forward. And I think it's really interesting to look at short-term impacts, transformational impacts on some key industries. So when we think about things like telehealth and online learning, and consumer-facing applications like in retail and grocery and food delivery and those types of things, you really have to plan for this hybrid environment. As we've discussed, going on for an extended time, and whether some of it will ever truly sort of come back, right? Mm-hmm. I think to some degree, some of the convenience and the productivity and the benefits that have been realized through this, will be here to stay for the longer term.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about the pandemic has been a really great pressure test of a lot of these concepts that we've heard for years across the industry, remote work being one of them. Everyone says, oh, we get better productivity because there's remote work. But what this seems to have done is it's really allowed the business to pressure test how well they can pivot. What does that mean for their customers? Because now customer needs are different. What they're looking for that's a priority to them is a little bit different. Internal needs of the organization are different. Now, you're shifting focus from just delivering those products to ensuring they're highly secure, right? So a lot of these things we've been preaching in the industry for a very long time, especially around DevOps and DevSecOps, are really starting to take a front seat in organizations. One of the brilliant things that I've seen because of the pandemic over the last year is even organizations who don't have formal transformation initiatives and efforts in place are forced to still go through some type of transformation with their organization to maintain competitiveness or even survive. Because now it's not just about thriving in the environment, it's about understanding how to pivot to even survive. We've seen a lot of retail industries go bankrupt. We've seen a huge shift in real estate, right? So how businesses decide, even with their hybrid strategies, how they're going to renegotiate contracts with all of this office space that's sitting idle right now. And right. Does it make more sense for them to shift there? So there's a lot of operational considerations that are being made by organizations, as well as some unique opportunities and unique challenges are starting to be presented. I think HR is starting to take a front seat a lot more in initiatives. You look at employee wellness. It's more important than it's ever been, and it's giving the opportunity for these guys to stand at the front lines and finally be cheerleaders for their organizations in a way maybe they haven't had an opportunity to have a spotlight shined on. Because a lot of us think HR sits in the background, and now a lot of their programs are really pivotal and the cornerstone of how businesses are going to move forward and look at employee care, satisfaction. Onboarding is a lot different. It's pretty revelational to see just a lot of these things we've been talking about in the industry, even before DevOps, that people have played around with and said these are better concepts or better ways of business. But now we're actually pressure testing them through a real world tragedy and pandemic and seeing how that plays out and what that looks like for each and every organization.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been talking about digital transformation for years now, and there was a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. And I think it was because a lot of organizations really just couldn't wrap their brains around it. They didn't have like a reason to do it beyond, providing customer satisfaction or keeping up with their competitors. But, having this pandemic occur kind of gave them a reason to really go and say, all right, this is what we need to do to, A, keep our employees productive, B, provide that top quality customer experience, and just kind of keep the wheels on the bus. And before it was more like, okay, well, we'll see these, we'll measure by certain metrics, and maybe we'll see an increase, maybe we won't. Is that enough for us to do digital transformation? But I also think that it's important and Sean, you alluded to this, digital transformation impacts so many different areas of the business. It's not just about improving customer experience. It's not just about making employees more productive. It's about keeping them sane, with the HR apps and things like that, employee wellness. It's amazing how by having that laser focus on digital transformation, once there was a reason to do it, a real legitimate reason to do it, companies that have undergone the digital transformation and are still undergoing them have really started to thrive, and they've been able to pivot their business successfully. And that, to me, I think is, it's a success story. If you really take a look at what's been done so far, and just the fact that so many organizations have been successful so far in their efforts. And I didn't want to kind of, take that off the, the rails, but I wonder how much of that is, when we're talking about DevOps, where does that fit into a lot of these kind of success stories, if you will, with these organizations? I mean, is it a central core of digital transformation efforts, or is it more of a tool, if you will, within a larger process? Whoever wants to answer that one.
I'll hop in first this time, if you like.
Sure.
So with DevOps, I think there's a unique opportunity that a lot of organizations are taking. At the core of most digital transformations, at least I've been part of and been privy to from peers in the industry, they're very centric around technology. You'll hear the term, every business is a software company, being thrown around. Now, while that may not always ring true for everyone, I believe the spirit of what they're trying to say is there's a better way for us to use technology to enable a better customer experience, a more valuable outcome for our customers. And through leveraging that technology, we're able to see better returns and give back to the community in a lot of different ways beyond just our products. DevOps, I think where the real value comes is there's been this evolution over the last year or two where people are starting to realize that a value chain, or the supply chain of an organization, and the value that's being delivered doesn't end when the product is in our customers' hands, but it's when value has been delivered to our customers' customers, right? So we go to that nth degree to make sure that not only are we just selling something and saying, hey, have a great day because we got it in your hands as fast as possible, but we're able to use feedback loops and telemetry to actually say, how successful is this for your customers? What type of experience are your customers having? How can we work with you and partner to have a deeper relationship than just a buyer and seller, right? So we're starting to see a lot of that proliferate the industry. The pandemic's also provided us a really great opportunity to take a step back because everyone is slowing down, everyone's having to adjust and pivot and say, how do we overhaul all the systems, right? Instead of looking this, let's improve this silo or let's improve this area of the business, we're able to start bridging a lot of those areas instead of just saying, well, let's throw the hammer down and start busting these silos. Right. Let's start bridging a lot of these areas and understanding where the challenges are. It allows us as leaders of our organizations to dig much deeper to understand broader problems with the organization. And we can see that, once again, going back to how that's being pressure tested, right? We all know is building continuity plans. That looks really great on paper, but if it's not put into practice every year, and what better way, unfortunately, to practice that than actually experiencing a real outage, a real security breach, a real pandemic? Do we put those things through the paces to say, is the theory and the practice that we've put on paper actually practical and applicable to what we'll do in real life? And then suss out where those problems or challenges are with the execution of that plan to be able to reinforce that plan and strengthen it so we can deliver better value both internally to our organization and externally to our customer and market.
I think before the pandemic, for many of organizations, digital transformation was an initiative. It was a goal. It was a project.
Mm-hmm.
But during the pandemic, digital transformation has become a necessity.
Yes.
And when a project becomes a necessity, that means that what you're really looking for, the agility and speed and ability to respond faster, almost in real time. And this is not just about IT. This is about wall-to-wall, end-to-end processes. And IT is that connecting tissue of the overall digital transformation. And the foundation of that is the DevOps. Because DevOps brings automation, brings ability to respond faster. And the technology trends which has happened in last 5 years, like emergence of the cloud, ability to auto-scale in cloud, ability to automate things from the cloud. More and more people are working remote. Ability to deploy automation tools which are delivered from cloud because IT is not going back to office. So DevOps has become a very critical component to achieve the speed. Every company's starting point is different. For cloud native companies, they already have a lot of implementation of their IT into the cloud already. If not, more and more companies have started moving. And that is actually creating a new opportunities for the DevOps engineers overall. It is the skill set which is tremendously needed in this marketplace, and it will continue to grow. And that's where the places like DevOps Institute help to build that skill set for IT teams across the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add that from the point of view of transformational outcomes, one of the key things there is making sure that cultural change has been institutionalized. And so, from the standpoint of DevOps, and sort of coming back full circle to your question, Charlene, around, is it a core or is it something broader? It's both, right? Because of course it's underlying the technology and the ability to achieve success is there, right, within the pipeline. But beyond that, there's relevance as well, even in business functions. If we're talking about the opportunity to identify new revenue streams, or looking at the overall impact of building a continuous learning culture, and the ability to accelerate change. These are things that translate, to every area of the business. So from my perspective, DevOps really has that overall end-to-end impact to be able to deliver against. So, and I totally agree with my co-panelists. The pandemic has been that driving force to be able to surface that and really, sort of shine a light on the value that it can add in a time of crisis. But from a long-term perspective, the value certainly continues to be there. Innovation as well has a significant role to play here too, right? Mm-hmm. So just in terms of being able to innovate faster, to be able to look at that pivot point as was described earlier, that's a huge learning curve. I mean, there's some pain that went along with that, having to do it through the pandemic, but there's also some long-term gains in being able to understand resiliency and responsiveness, in that time of crisis.
Yeah, it's really been amazing for me to see how quickly organizations have been able to undergo these digital transformation efforts, and really understand what their business needs. It's almost like they they just kind of launched, if you will. It was just like from 0 to 60 and like nothing. So, but that said, are we too late for organizations that haven't started their digital transformation processes yet? I mean, those that may be a little, slow to start, they recognize the value. They just haven't been able to kind of get their stuff together yet to do it. But, is it too late for them? And if not, I hope not. But if it's not, what are some of the things that maybe they need to keep in mind as they start to think about undergoing a digital transformation process? What are maybe some of the best practices that they need to consider? And Jennifer, I'm going to let you start with this one because this is your turn. So
Sure. Well, and I think, interestingly, I think the same principles hold true, right, in terms of best practices for digital transformation, whether we're talking about, in times of the pandemic or not, right? The key thing, the most important thing is that introspection and insights, right? So really understanding and being honest about and knowing your business, right? Understanding what those end-to-end processes are, knowing and understanding your marketplace, knowing and understanding your customers, so that, to Sean's point, when you do want to deliver to that nth degree, you've got the insights there as part of your end state, right? That you want to achieve. So I think all of those things, hold true in either case, and then bringing them together into a well-defined strategy that honestly reflects, right, the strengths and weaknesses of your own organization. And then last but not least, I think, something that often gets not as much attention as it needs to, having metrics in place, right? So that you've got that continuous learning ability over time and being able to come back and not only say, did we achieve what we set out to, but in an ongoing basis, where do we need to continually pivot and shift our efforts to make sure that we, stay. And of course, as goals change. I mean, we talked a little bit before about what happens when this is done, right? So be it a hybrid workforce or some of the other trends that we might expect to see in 2021 with DevOps and more broadly in business and in the economy. How do we help ourselves and our business partners to be able to continually pivot in that very agile way? And, so to me, it's about those three things, right? Having the right insights, the right strategy and tactics defined, and then third, the right metrics in place to keep you on point.
All right. Sean or Pankaj, you guys have any best practices you want to share?
Sure. So I want to answer your earlier question. No, it's not too late. There is no such thing as too late. Please, if there's any business out there, you have not gone through a digital transformation now, it is never too late. Now, the second part of that I will caveat with, because I think it just needs to be said. A lot of the practitioners feel this way, but it's not often announced, and I don't believe it's always heard enough. Transformation is not about just carrying you from one state to the other. I really wish that the industry as a whole would start to adopt digital evolution, because that's really the truth of what we're doing. We should be evolving every single day. We're adapting to the pandemic, and then we will adapt to the next event that occurs within our industry, good or bad. We're constantly adapting to the needs of our employees. We're adapting to these new technologies and frameworks and ways of doing business every single day. That's an evolutionary step that will never change. The transformation is just the spark, the catalyst, if you will, for that evolution to begin and to be recognized and, as Jennifer had mentioned earlier, institutionalized in the organization, right? And that's your culture, that's your people, that's your technology, whether it's DevOps, whether it's Agile, whatever it is, right? It's never too late to start. From the perspective of best practices, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record to all those that have probably seen millions of videos on culture, on transformation, but start with your culture. And I don't just mean implementing programs that are, making onboarding easier or customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, but I mean really start by taking stock of where your organization is right now. You don't have to be light years ahead. You don't have to be like Netflix. You don't have to be like Amazon or Microsoft. You are your own unique entity. You will be the next whatever company, right? That somebody is going to want to model the great things that you do. I always think back to the TPS system, Toyota Production System, right? Toyota was massively successful in being one of the best manufacturers in the entire world, despite giving the secret away to the rest of the world, and all these other manufacturers adopted it, but they still were not able to achieve the same level of performance as Toyota because it was built by Toyota for Toyota. This was the way they did business. They found this worked best for them. And I think that's a sorely missed or overlooked area in a lot of transformations is there's so many frameworks, there's so many ways of doing it, there's so many quote unquote best practices that are out there. Take a look at where your organization is. Take a look at where your people are and think about where you want to be, and then find things that align to that help you be successful. And eventually you'll start noticing you're creating your own processes, you're creating your own frameworks, you're creating your own ways forward, and then share those with the world. Right? Because it's not just enough to consume something, see that it works and move on, but take the lessons that you've learned and the things that you're creating and share that out in the world. Maybe someone else is able to use that and perpetuate their business in a positive direction.
I think Sean and Jennifer covered many, many great points, and there are so many great practices. We are in 2020, so if you sum all the numericals in 2020, it comes to the 4, and I'm going to cover the 4 key best practices. First, I think Sean and Jennifer did a wonderful job explaining that embrace the cultural shift. It is a new way of thinking, it's a new way of doing it. But to succeed in this cultural shift, IT skill set is the most important part. You must shift the culture. All company can align, but if you don't have a skill set inside the IT organization, you will not succeed. So as you are embracing this cultural shift, invest in the IT skill set. That's the first. Second one is design and build for speed. Because the automation and the speed to respond to the market differentiates from winners versus losers. So the philosophy should be there, automate everything you can. Mm-hmm. And that's where the DevOps comes into the play. Look for every opportunity which you can automate. And automation requires the DevOps skill set, but it also look at your applications in a different way. What I can modularize, so I can reuse those functions. And that's what the microservices kind of application brings into that. DevOps is also about modularization and connecting them together so they work like a machine, one after another, one feeding another. So that's a whole part. Also start thinking as we move into 2020 or 2021, that how do I build a self-correcting infrastructure? And cloud is already giving you auto scale, resiliency, all those pieces into that. We're not to go into detail, but when you're building and designing for the speed, see what are things can achieve that. Third thing, which is going to be more and more critical, is the security first, security first, security first. Yes. The recent SolarWind example taught us so much. A small component on a broader enterprise, a small crack or vulnerability can impact the whole ecosystem. And in this world of application and API, where API has become the lifeline of the businesses, and more digital transformation related business, are you protecting your applications in API? As we move into the world of the multi-cloud, do I have a consistent security posture across multi-clouds for that? So those are some of the things that security first rather than the bolt-on. And the last is that build for visibility. What I mean by invest into your observability stack, build into tools and mechanisms to give you a visibility inside what is happening in your infrastructure, what is happening in your application. Because if you don't see, you can't fix it. To summarize, embrace the digital shift, embrace the cultural shift, but make sure you have the right skill set to do that. Design and build for speed. Security first, no more bolt-on security, and visibility, 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 because if you can't see, you can't fix it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, all are great points, all are great best practices. And I want to thank all of you, all three of you, for your expertise today during our discussion. Great stuff. If organizations have not begun their digital transformation efforts, now is the time. I think every organization understands the importance of digital transformation now more than ever. And it's great to hear that it's not too late. Thanks, Sean. And it's security, as Pankaj and Jennifer both mentioned, super important. It should be an integral part of digital transformation efforts. We have lots of information about digital transformation and what's happening in the space in general, and some of the best practices on DevOps.com. So I do urge everybody to check out the website and read up what we've got on digital transformation. Guys, before we close things out, any parting words, any parting advice on digital transformation or DevOps in general? I guess not. All right.
This is the time that will create stories which you will tell to your grandkids.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think focusing on doing what's right for your organization and doing what's right for your customers. Take care of your people, take care of your customers. Don't just do what's easy. Because there can be so much change that's going on that it's very easy to say, okay, well, we can revisit this, right? And generate a lot of cultural debt that never gets paid back off.
I was thinking similarly, there's in some way too, the reality of the pandemic conditions has been a level of exhaustion, I think, as well. And even despite that, it's important not to, keep focusing ahead and making sure that things that might be beneficial, particularly coming up on the radar, trends for 21 that could be taken advantage of, don't lose the momentum, even though it's been an exhausting past number of months. Keep the momentum going and take advantage of the exciting trends that are on the way for 2021.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, on that note, I do want to thank all three of you, Sean, Jennifer, and Pankaj. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for your expertise, and love to have you guys back on a future panel discussion or even on TechStrong TV. So thank you again. I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, here now with the webinars preview. As always, I tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are happening in the next few days, and hopefully we can get those on your calendar and you can join me for them. The first one is happening on DevOps.com. It's called The Psychology of Chaos Engineering, and it is happening Tuesday, January 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's sponsored by Gremlin. This one sounds really, really interesting. I'm very excited about this one. This webinar will take a look at chaos engineering from the human perspective and delve into both the positive and the negative outcomes to all groups of people involved with chaos engineering. That includes the users, the engineers, the product, and the business owners. Julie Gunderson, who is a DevOps advocate at PagerDuty, she is going to discuss some case studies from organizations where chaos engineering has been implemented and explore some of the changes in attitude that these practices create. As I said, I'm really excited about this webinar. I hope you can join me for this one. The next webinar is called A New Year's Ransomware Resolution. It's happening Tuesday, January 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern over on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by Axio. And we've all heard about the increase in ransomware over the last year as the COVID-19 pandemic forced companies into lockdown mode, and hackers took advantage by targeting pretty much anything, including hospitals, research organizations, global manufacturers, you name it. It's been brutal, to say the least. But in this webinar, Axio is going to demonstrate what it calls the world's first comprehensive ransomware assessment technology based on hundreds of real-world events. I hate to say that, hundreds of real-world events. And they'll also discuss some topics, including how you can combine the learnings of the world's top analyst and DHS guidance, why you should evaluate your susceptibility based on fact patterns, and how you can get started with the Axio 360 free ransomware assessment. All right, finally, happening, let's see, Thursday, I don't know, Tuesday, January 19th. Yeah, that's when it is. Last webinar I want to let you know about is called Shift Left with NGINX Layer 7 Security. It's happening Tuesday, January 19th, as I said, at 10 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. Yes, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's sponsored by NGINX, which is part of F5. I'll be moderating this one, so I hope you'll stay up with me as we look at security in the DevOps processes, including best practices to defend web and layer 7 applications against a range of application attacks, such as XSS, SQL, injections, and threat campaigns, and more. How to identify and stop untrusted bots that help malicious actors to automate their attack. This is the security as code idea, how organizations can start sooner and help security to shift left, integrating into application development CI/CD pipelines. And finally, how to gain insight of overall security posture of your organization. So good stuff, good stuff. Hopefully, as I said, hopefully you'll stay up with me and check out this webinar. Check out all three of these webinars and all the other webinars that we have coming up across all the sites. You can always check DevOps.com, SecurityBoulevard.com, and ContainerJournal.com to see what our lineup of webinars is, both upcoming and on demand, because we have a ton of them on demand as well. All right, that's it for this edition of the Webinars Preview. I will be back on Monday with a fresh new batch. Until then, have a great day, and as always, stay safe.
All right, next up, we've got Mitch Ashley. His regular Analyst Corner segment. They're going to be talking about the developer cloud, so let's check it out.
Hi, welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. Next week, actually this week, Predict 2021 is happening on January 21st and 22nd. I've mentioned before, I'm leading a panel on AI and machine learning. My AI experience goes way, way back early in my career, back before machine learning was the big emphasis in AI. And it was a really fun panel because we had a diversity of perspectives from R&D through people who are using AI for helping operations manage all the information, put context and meaning to a lot of the information that's presented us in an operational environment. And one of the things that I think about as we're moving into, or we're already into this 2021 and trying not to look back too hard into 2020, is what things have changed and what things are going to carry forward with us. COVID was not okay, that was a momentary blip and we'll go back to the way things were. It was a game changer in many, many ways, many unfortunate ways, of course, too, but many ways about how we work, whether it's remote work, tools that we use. But one of them is the emphasis on low code, no code. That has come up more times in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 months than it had in the 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 years prior to that. Not that it wasn't a topic, but now it is front and center. You have to ask yourself why. It's because we had to respond quickly during different conditions where that was demanded of us. But then we ask ourselves, well, why can't we do that when things are less under the gun, less don't have a choice, got to make a decision, let's move on. And so you learn from those experiences and figure out how else that they can benefit from you. I think another one is the cloud, the platform providers. I started using Amazon Web Services 2008, somewhere in that, fairly early. As a matter of fact, it was the time when if you wanted a visual interface into Amazon Web Services, you had to use a plugin that only worked in Firefox. And any automation had to do through command line scripts from your computer. I mean, that's kind of the environment that we were working in. But today, there's so many services that get built up in environments like Amazon and Azure and Google Cloud Platform. It almost seems like when you're shopping on your Amazon cart and you look for something and you think about the next thing you need, and all of a sudden it's in your list of stuff you should look at, like how did it know? I always feel that way about some of the services that get created in the cloud. Like they are working on building more and more capabilities to serve customers and to help us. On the other hand, that can make the environment more complex, more difficult to tame, to understand, to manage. And of course, vendor lock-in and things like those kind of issues. So we've always had alternatives to the major three, Amazon, Google, Azure, also kind of IBM and Oracle, if you want to think of the big five. That smaller providers, maybe not necessarily small, but the next tier of providers have always been a great option. I know I've used some alternative cloud providers for doing R&D and product development and some production work. And there's something to say for the simplicity isn't the right word because it makes it sound like it's simple and not as powerful, but it is really powerful because it does the core things really well, and all those other things don't necessarily get in the way. And of course, they're adding more and more services to alternative cloud providers, but I see it as a real trend that we can take advantage of. Yes, you can do tons of great things in Amazon and Google and Azure environments, but you can also put the pedal to the metal and just get some things done very quickly in an environment that's tailored towards developers. And let's face it, we wouldn't be in the cloud if it wasn't for developers. That's who really led the charge. Here's a resource we can use with a credit card. I don't have to go through IT. I'm not shadow IT anymore. I'm on the forefront of where we're all headed. And I think that needs to be a healthy part of our mix when we think about cloud platform providers, not just the big folks, but how you work with a plethora of different scale, different size providers. So I think as we move through the year, we'll be still talking about these kind of rapid, fast ability to deliver quickly environments and tools, as well as how we create software. And this too, just like working remotely, will be one of the mainstay capabilities that we need to have within our arsenal. At least it is for mine. Certainly, if you don't know, I play kind of a dual role. In addition to running in the analyst firm, ASG, I work as the CTO for MediaOps, the company that produces this kind of content. And it's very much part of my strategy that we have implemented in how we manage the platforms, the technology that we choose, where we choose to develop code versus low code, no code, and how we can be nimble and quick and respond to market opportunities as well as conditions. So I'm guessing that low code, no code, alternative cloud, things like that will be topics that will continue with us on through 2021. Well, I wish you the best. I know you're getting cranked up for the year after the holidays. It seems like this was a little longer of a ramp up period for me because I worked a lot through the holidays. So I took my vacation actually a little bit after. But it's like jumping in a fast-paced river. Things didn't slow down over the holidays. Maybe they took a bit of a pause here and there, but the ramp back up to full speed and beyond, it's very quick. So I wish you the best. Keep in touch, and thank you for watching and listening. Have a good day.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Monty Schwieben, who's the CEO of Splice Machine. Monty, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Hey, there's a lot going on in the land of AI. I think AI is starting to show up in every application you can imagine, and people are talking about feature stores. And I think some of us in the land of DevOps are scratching our head because we're kind of like, isn't this a repository? Haven't we seen this story before? So what's new and different here? But walk us through a little bit with what's going on with these feature stores and why the AI/data ops community is getting excited about it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it does sound just like the old data warehouse or the data lake or the lake house. It sounds like the same, but it's not. And it's really different. And here are the 3 differences of what a feature store brings to the table. First, from a benefit perspective, the whole point of the feature store is to take that 80 or 90% of the time that a data scientist spends on feature engineering and slash it in half, maybe even more, and let them work more on modeling and experimentation. That's the why. So the what of a feature store, what it does is 3 things. First, it enables discovery. So features are a repository of pipelines, of data transformations, of work that takes raw data and turning it into something that a machine learning model can use. That's the hard part of the feature engineering. But when you do it once, shouldn't you be able to store it and find it and be able to reuse it again? So feature stores typically have some way of a data scientist being able to search through a repository and say, hey, did anyone ever build a 30, 60, 90-day summary of sales that's organized by territory? And essentially be able to find that recency, frequency, and monetary value set of features without having to code them again. So that's point 1. Point 2 is that trying to keep features fresh is a complicated problem. And what I mean by that is best articulated by what happens to us that's so annoying on so many sites. How many times have you gotten an ad or an offer for something you bought 10 minutes ago? It's annoying. It's certainly a lost marketing opportunity for the companies out there, and it's unnecessary. Why does it happen? It happens because the feature vector representing you wasn't updated fast enough to say, hey, you bought this item this time ago. In other words, a recency feature of when the last time you bought shoes were, so that you don't get the shoe ad or the shoe offer. And so feature stores keep features real time and fresh. And that's another unique element that just a data warehouse doesn't do. A data warehouse is kind of stale or stationary is probably a better word there. So discovering features and serving features in real time are 2 things. The last thing is every time you're shown a prediction and you either buy or not buy, or every time you declare a transaction as fraudulent or not fraudulent, or in an industrial framework where every time you're getting sensor data in and you're determining whether a component is leaking or there's mechanical failure. Each of these examples are training examples for the future of that model. And being able to remember the history of features, not just the real time, what's the profile now, but what was the profile every single time in the past, so that you can collect up training sets for machine learning models, is extremely hard. When you look at the SQL that data scientists have to use to build training sets, they've got all this complicated SQL in there to try to remember all the features and what time the features had certain values so that the times all line up. This is incredibly ugly, and it takes so much time. Feature stores do that automatically. So summarizing, we reduce the amount of feature engineering work by first being able to search for features that other people have worked on. Second, we are automatically given features that have real-time values in them, so I can just serve them into the models. And third, they're automatically memorized for historical purposes to be used for training later. That's what a feature store is, and that's fundamentally different than data lakes or data warehouses. Data lakes and data warehouses are just inputs to this whole process. They're not doing all of this heavy lifting.
All right. We hear the phrase data ops a lot in pipelines, and we hear ML ops and pipelines and workflows. So what's the relationship between these two things? And then maybe we'll jump into where it fits in the DevOps lexicon as well.
That's a great question. And the data ops and ML ops do need to come together. And this is really an important, I think, next stage or evolution for our whole community. ML ops is all about being able to seamlessly, reliably, repeatedly, and I would say transparently, taking machine learning models from the experimental stages where data scientists are training, testing, and in an experimental framework of trying to converge to better predictive accuracy, to being able to deploy those models in production, to being able to monitor those models for any model drift or any feature drift for the features in those models, and being able to provide that transparency, and doing this in a way that, similar to DevOps, to your point, we do with software today, of being able to control what changes are made to software and what versions actually get into production, and be able to roll those back if something goes wrong. ML ops is the same idea. How do I take a complicated pipeline of feature engineering, a complicated model, and then package that up for deployment in production that an application might use, and then be able to look back at it and say, is it operating right? And if not, rolling it back. That's ML ops. Data ops is at the underlying foundation of these ML ops, because as we just talked about with feature stores, feature engineering and feature stores are storing pipelines of data transformations. And there's underlying data that are serving these pipelines. So think of data ops as being able to snap back in time and look at a data warehouse or a database or a data lake, the underlying feature store especially, at an earlier period of time to determine what went in there. So for example, imagine putting these two worlds together and thinking about time travel of data, and also thinking about model ops. How these come together in a real world scenario is best articulated with a story like in an insurance world. Imagine a regulator. Insurance is heavily regulated. A regulator comes into an insurance company and says, your underwriting model is discriminatory, and we think it's wrong, and we need you to investigate this with us. This is a major claim and of great exposure to the company. And so how do you answer questions for the regulator? Well, first, what's the model that's currently in production? What are the features that went into that model? What was the training set for that model? And can I snap back to the snapshot of the database of when those training sets were created, so I could look at every piece of raw data that went into training that model and prove to the regulator that this model is actually a good model and not a model that violates any compliance or any legal or ethical issues out there. So that's where model ops actually comes into play with data ops. At every prediction made by the model in production, how can we track the lineage, not just back to the model, not just back to the features in the model, but to the actual raw data that actually was used to transform those features?
I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect, though, with the DevOps side of the house. These guys are trying to update applications multiple times a month, let's say, and the data scientists seem to be updating models or even rolling out models maybe 2 or 3 times a year if we're lucky. So how do we kind of get those data scientists and the models that have to get embedded into the applications aligned in a way that makes this work? Because it feels like it's a Venus and Mars situation.
Yeah, I think this is a fundamental constraint in real world deployments of machine learning models today. It's a focus for some of the functionality that we're deploying in Spice Machine as well. And I think the complexity of putting a model into production is inhibiting the ability for the machine learning community to deploy models at a more rapid cadence, to your point. So just to give an example of a way to make this better, it's a particularly unique thing that we work on, and that's a new approach to putting models into deployment that doesn't require as heavy lifting. So first, the before picture. Data scientist finishes their experiments, they've been training, they come up with a good model. Perhaps it's better than the one that's in production, to the point we were just talking about, and now they want to get it out there. In the old world, the world that's currently live in most places today, they got to go call someone else. That's a machine learning engineer. It's not really a data scientist who's really great at math and statistical capabilities, doesn't know the frameworks, but is a really good software engineer. And that machine learning engineer has to help the data scientist wrap this model in an API and maybe containerize it, maybe push it, and track that pushing in a source code controllable way. And it's a dance that has to happen between the data scientist and the machine learning engineer, and then the application developer who's using the machine learning model has to know there's a new container out and they should maybe connect to that container versus this other thing. And it's a dance between this community of people. There's another way of doing this that is easier, which is leveraging the capabilities of a database and avoiding some of this extraneous endpoint software engineering that's necessary. And just as an example, imagine if a data scientist can go through the normal approval cycle, ethical, compliance types of approvals, and says, yes, this model is predictive enough and it's been approved by my company's compliance policies, I'm ready to deploy. And imagine if they can deploy it automatically and it gets embedded into the database where suddenly this new model is replacing the old model. And the way that the application engineer is using the model is really simple. The deployment mechanism is making a prediction table. And the prediction table is really easy to understand. Machine learning models take features and turn them into predictions. So imagine if you just had a table that had columns for features and you start sticking records into that table. Imagine if automatically a model was watching that and able to actually execute the model on top of those features and add predictions on those same records. So if you're making a recommendation on a website, the features might be what you've recently looked at, how long ago you bought shoes, kind of the things we talked about before. And as soon as that comes into the database, imagine that the model ran and said, show, accessories or show toys to the customer. And that was put in there. Now the application developer just needs to do a SQL lookup. And that is called database deployment of machine learning models. And it means that all the code necessary to make those tables, it's done for you. And all of the access to the model is done through SQL. Everyone knows SQL. And you can control, of course, access to this deployment with access controls. But now you've taken all of the big heavy lifting of the software engineering necessary to get a model from my experiment platform out into production. It's one line of code. And I think this new approach is going to be part of the equation that makes machine learning deployment more rapid, more seamless, and more accessible with a much smaller staff. I hope that made sense.
It does. And at the risk of oversimplifying some things, as I understand it, you spend a lot of time training the AI model, and then you create the inference engine, and that goes out to the endpoint somewhere that executes this thing. And over time, however, as the data feeds may change, I may have different sources of information, or we could see something like COVID comes along and all our assumptions are blown out the window and we have to rip and replace that AI model. How do we know when that event occurs, or how do we keep track of what that inference engine is up to and whether it's still relevant or not? Is that going to be a whole other monitoring field, or how are we going to go after that?
Yeah, the monitoring of models, both in terms of their predictive accuracy, as well as just monitoring the use of the model, is extremely important. And many companies are working on building frameworks to do this in the context of the database deployment model versus the endpoint deployment model that I spoke about a moment ago. All of the predictions are in a table. So imagine having a dashboard that's graphical in nature, and you could actually be watching every feature and every prediction that's made by the model and seeing the frequency of various predictions and actually triggering alerts when things go beyond a certain level in terms of frequency of one prediction versus another, or seeing the distribution of the features that are input to the model being radically different than the features that the feature distributions that it was trained on, and being able to alert the ops team of these changes as well as the data science team. This is much easier when it's just populating a SQL database, and you can build these kind of dashboards and tools like Grafana and other maybe business intelligence systems that really visualize what's going on in a SQL database. So I think that monitoring and governance is a hot topic. I think people are taking different approaches to it, but this is absolutely something that's incredibly important, and being able to provide ops teams that visibility to what's going into the model and what's coming out of the model, as well as the application developers and data scientists in an accessible way, I think is going to be really important. And our perspective, for what it's worth, is that SQL is the best place to do that because everyone knows it. Others have other ideas, but the whole idea is to be able to, in real time, track the distributions of predictions and features, and be able to find these drifts that take place naturally in the world. These macro ones, like you said, that might require a whole new model to be deployed, or perhaps others that just need a little tweak of a model. Both are really important to catch and really important to streamline the remediation of those observations.
All right, let's bring it full circle then. Are feature stores standalone products in your mind, or are they going to be, quote unquote, a feature of some other larger platform? What's your take?
I love that question because I'd like to answer it both ways. And the meaning, and what I mean by that is, for example, Spice Machine has a full machine learning manager that is essentially built up of a modeling system of Jupyter notebooks and Spark data sources connected to experimentation platforms built on MLflow, a great open source library. And of course, the database deployment mechanisms we just talked about. It has an underlying SQL store. It has a feature store. It's a complete platform. And certainly people can utilize it as a service and light it up in literally a minute or deploy it on premises as a complete data science platform. But on the other hand, it's important to modularize the feature store. And what I mean by that is I see people using our feature store perhaps in a Databricks environment or somebody else's data science, maybe somebody's bespoke data science environment. And we've built our feature store to be modular in that way. So I think you'll see adoption of feature stores in both manners. There are companies that are just feature store companies. They're obviously going to be modular because they're only solving one piece of the equation. I think that's limited, and you don't get to really get the same sort of streamlined combination of what we talked about of data ops and ML ops. But on the other hand, people do need feature stores for platforms they've already built, perhaps, and that's an opportunity to use ours or somebody else's modular feature store. But I think the real benefit, the true value, is in a tightly integrated, seamless environment. And I think that's how you get that kind of 100 times productivity improvements for data science. So it'll happen both ways, but the most value is when it's a component of an integrated architecture.
All right. Hey, Monty, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
I'm back, baby. You know who I am. And if you don't, you can kiss my shiny metal ass. Yeah, 2020 has been a jerk of a year, but thanks to Mom, us robots are immune from COVID. But what about 2021? What it does hold in store for DevOps, digital transformation, cyber, and cloud native. We have assembled an out-of-this-world cast using the latest artificial intelligence to cue you in. Predict 2021. This great virtual event is happening on January 21st and 22nd, 5 hours a day. Check out the great speaker lineup and register for free at predict2021.com. There will be great prizes, exhibits, interactive moments, picture booths, and maybe even a chance to win a drink with a robot. It's all free if you register now. Go to predict2021.com for all the info. Don't be a jerkwad. I'll see you at Predict 2021.
All right, that wraps today's TechStrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed every single one of these interviews. Tune in tomorrow. We'll have a brand new episode for you. And another friendly reminder that we have got the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit coming up this week, Wednesday and Thursday, January 20th and 21. Get it, 2021. And lots of great conversations being had at that summit about all things IT, cybersecurity, cloud native, IT as code, you name it, we talk about it. So check out www.predict2021.com to register and check out the agenda. And until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and we will see you tomorrow. Please come back and stay safe.